Concerning wildlife, it's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Okay.
And I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, skin hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village need to use the old Aussie trick to stop being swooped. You have to wear an ice cream tub on your head with eyes drawn on the back so they think you're watching them. True story.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good evening to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. And as I was just saying to Kev a moment ago, coming up at midnight with the phone in, it's your opportunity to talk back. And it has been a big day for Britain, hasn't it? It's been a big day for all of us, and about the, pride and a sense of just wonder at what people sacrificed for us, and may I add, are still sacrificing for us through the military. And I really want to hear your stories. I want to hear from you. If you are a veteran, and I'm not just talking about veterans World War I and II, but there wouldn't be, I don't think, many sadly alive of that ilk, but any kind of veteran of any war, because we have to remember that there are things going on in the world right now where our men and women are engaged, and increasingly we're told that the likelihood of them being engaged in wars to defend this country are increasing. So I think it is time really to take a look and see about why people. I want to understand why people join the military. What is it about them? What is it about their courage, or their sense of pride, or their sense of defending this nation? What is it that is different about a soldier, a sailor, or an air person, I suppose I should say? Because there is something very special about the armed forces. As you know, I worked with them for for about 9 years, and I went to places with them, like Bosnia, for example, where I saw these men and women and met these men and women and lived with these men and women, and they were the ones with the guns. I was there with a microphone, but still, they are an extraordinary, I can't begin to tell you, an extraordinary bunch of people. And they are different. There is something significantly different about somebody who chooses to join up. And I just wonder if we've got what it takes as a nation, if we all had to do something to defend this nation. And I'd like to hear from you as well about your World War II or World War I vet in your family and what it meant to them, what it was about them that you see as being very different to just your average Joe Blow. And not to forget that there were people in this country as well working extremely hard to support the war effort, and sacrificed an enormous amount in order that this tiny little island, this really very small piece of rock with its peoples, were able to defend against the Nazis. We're able to fight against the Nazis with all of our allies and with all of our countrymen around the world. But still, there is something special about that, and I'd like to celebrate that at midnight. So give me a call. Let's talk about our military, about our veterans, and about how extraordinary, truly extraordinary these men and women really are. 0344 499 1000, that's the number to give me a call. And if you want to just send a message, you can do that as well. Put the word talk and your message to 87222. Right, coming up before then, we have the newspapers for Tuesday, and Phil Dave will be in the studio to go through those. I think we can guess what's on the front pages. Certainly the picture editors would have had a lot to choose from today. Claire Bosey will be here as well, editor of Chef and Restaurant magazine, as she talks us through where you can get a really good but reasonably cheap meal, good quality. And she's the woman that knows. Alex Three Lions Irons will also be here to talk us through the sport from the weekend. But first, today marked the beginning of a 4-day celebration in the UK and some parts of Europe for VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. Now, that was on the 8th of May 1945, and it was the day that the Allies accepted Nazi Germany's surrender in the Second World War. Meanwhile, US President Trump has been kind of downplaying Europe's involvement in the war and renaming VE Day in the States as Victory Day and Veterans Day as Victory Day for the First World War. By the way, the veterans in America are livid because, as I've just said, there are veterans that are produced every time a soldier or a sailor or an airman or woman leaves their position. So I want to talk about that. Joining me now is Colonel Patrick Mercer, OBE, former MP and military historian. Colonel, it's very good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, Petrie. Very nice to speak to you.
Very nice to speak to you. That question that I've been asking, these people, I mean, you know better than I, that there is something extraordinary about somebody who gives up their, not just their life, but their whole being to defending this country, to joining the military. And I've always been in awe of the men and women that I've met. But do we still have that as a nation?
A little bit of background, if I may. My father was a theological student. He was going to be a vicar when he volunteered for the Second World War. He was wounded at Alamein, he was wounded at Anzio, he was decorated. He then left the army and went back to being a vicar. In 1947, he was ordained and off he went. He was an extraordinary man, an absolutely extraordinary man, had no intention of being a soldier. I was a regular. Nothing extraordinary about me. I joined the army because I wanted to. I was there for 25 years. And I commanded very, very ordinary men, a few women, who became heroes and heroines when the pressure was put on them. Do I believe we have those people around in our society today? Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. It may be fashionable to talk it down. It may be fashionable. It may be woke to talk about the fact that we could never, ever, ever face an enemy again. I've even heard men say to me, "Oh, it's not for me. I'm a coward. I'm a coward." Nonsense. Nonsense. When the time comes, our youngsters will step up. I'm absolutely sure of it.
So it's your view that it's the situation that maketh the man or woman?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, people will say we haven't been to war for a long time. And we haven't had a serious war for a long time, but we've had a number of minor engagements, albeit 10, 15 years ago, Iraq and Afghanistan, places like that. Those young lads, and they were mainly young lads at the time, they fought their guts out. They bled, they died in the sand and the dust for this country, just as much as my father and grandfather did. Now, again, I say it's fashionable to say that we won't do that again. I believe that if the situation comes up where we have to fight for our survival, where the cause of the war is just, that our youngsters will perform like the heroes and heroines that I believe they are.
And when we look at the men and women that did serve, and I had the great honour of meeting a few of them as a journalist, and interviewing many while they were obviously still with us, but there was something so quiet about them. I think that's the only word I can use. That there was this power. It's very difficult to put my finger on it, but there was this backbone of steel, but this quietness from the men and women of that era.
Well, I just use my father again as an example. Clearly, I was born in 1956. I never knew him when he was an infantry soldier. He killed Germans, large numbers of them, but I knew him as a vicar and a man of God. And when I talked to him about this, he talked about the war all the time, not the nasty bits, but the comradeship, the friendship, the loyalty, the courage, the enormous affection that he had for his Sherwood Forester soldiers. But he said to me, the years 1940 to 1946, in my life, my dad's life, they were in colour. Everything else was in black and white. He had a very successful career in the church. It was nothing, according to him, it was nothing to what he did for those 5 or 6 years where nothing special, but he defended Great Britain against an existential threat from Nazism. And he was never short of recognizing the fact that what he did, what the Americans did with whom he fought in Italy, really was nothing very much compared with what the Soviets did with their enormous sacrifice to turn back the tide of Nazism.
Now, we're talking about Trump, and I don't want to give him too much attention because he gets way too much, and that's his aim. But you know, he downplaying Europe's involvement and claiming victory on behalf of America. Now, there's no doubt about it that at the latter stages of the war, America was vastly important. We were running out of money, we were running out of weapons, we were running out of men. It was incredibly important, but it almost feels like he's stealing valour from what our men and women went through, because you know, women were dying in factories with munitions blowing up. You know, women were lost too. So will he get away with that?
Well, again, I can only tell you what my father's experience was. He'd been very seriously wounded in North Africa at Alamein with the 9th Armoured Brigade, 14th Battalion Sherwood Foresters. First time that he met an American was at Anzio in March 1944. Yeah. He'd had a bellyful, literally and metaphorically, of lead from the Germans by then. He was tired. A lot of his men had been killed by that stage. These lads turned up, the Americans turned up, absolutely full of enthusiasm, but fresh. They'd missed a couple, or maybe 3 years of warfare by the time they saw it. Of course, their contribution was important. He admired them. He thought they were good soldiers, but they hadn't had to put up with all the horrors of Dunkirk, Alamein, etc., before they actually showed up.
When you look at recruitment at the moment with the military, it is proving to be very difficult to get people to want to join up. Is this because of the way that we don't really seem to support our veterans very well? There doesn't seem to be, that what we've seen today, for example, if that were to happen even at a smaller scale every year to say thank you to veterans, what would it take, do you think, to get people to go, do you know what, that is a pretty decent career for me?
Petrie, you're touching a very sore point with me here. I honestly believe that if we put our heart and soul into recruiting, we could produce a full Army, Navy and Air Force, Royal Marines. Not overnight, of course not. But all it takes is a proper, thorough look at recruiting, properly funded, and a desire by the government to rebuild our armed forces from the shocking state that they're in at the moment by some simple means, which I used when I was a commanding officer. I used simple tools. I inherited a battalion that was about 80% recruited. I left the battalion, it was 120% recruited. Wow. That's a long time ago. But the raw material doesn't change. It just doesn't. I'm speaking from Newark in Nottinghamshire at the moment. I tell you, I could go onto the housing estates, I could go into the town of Newark today and use exactly the same methods, and I'd be like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, with lads and lasses following behind saying, give me some khaki, pay me properly, give me a decent job, show me that my accommodation will, tell me that I've got a decent career, exciting career, I'll defend the country, I'll step up. But the government's efforts, both Tory and Labour, the government's efforts have been woeful. It's as if they want the armed forces to implode.
I mean, you mentioned their accommodation, and the serving person in the military needs their family. We know about that. I lived in Germany for a while, so I saw, the accommodations there. Often the families wouldn't tolerate what serving members are put through in terms of accommodation and things. I mean, the accommodation these days, in a lot of cases, is just appalling, and it leads to people, serving members, feeling that they're just not valued and their families are not valued. And if families are going to be separated, I dated an officer for a while. He was away a lot, right? And I wasn't beholden to him for my accommodation, but still, you have to put up with a lot being with somebody who's in the military.
Yeah, ask my wife.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, she had many, many years of putting up with me being delighted to her, by the way. But,
I bet she wishes you were now, yeah?
Yeah, well, there we are. You've been peeping, haven't you? The fact remains that there's quite a small proportion. The army is a young person's place. It just is, and so it should be. Quite a small proportion of the army is married, and of course, married accommodation is extremely important for career soldiers, sailors, and airmen. Of course, it is, but it's absolutely outrageous that our warriors should have to live in the sort of accommodation for which, for instance, a prisoner would never put up with anything like that. There would be an absolute row if our prisons were anything like our barracks. But Petrie, I keep coming back to the fact we don't really have any soldiers, sailors and airmen left to worry about these things. Our numbers are tiny. And as the Secretary of State for Defence himself said, we are not ready to fight a war.
Which is really shocking, isn't it? And is this because many people sincerely, I think until Ukraine really, sincerely believed that old-style warfare wasn't really going to happen in the future, that tanks and men and guns were a thing almost of the past. So we don't need as many people. And we got a situation where some countries have had to borrow. A whole country, I think it's the Netherlands, has got 3 tanks or 11 tanks that they've borrowed from another country. I mean, we are so far behind if Russia were to decide on a land war.
You're making me get very political now, and I'm happy with that. We have a Prime Minister who carries on the Tory tradition of trying to provoke a land war with Russia. We've had the Chief of the General Staff saying that the army must be ready for a conventional war. We've had the Army Sergeant Major saying, beware, ladies and gentlemen, your sons and daughters and husbands are going to be killed fighting Russia. Well, okay. My own view is that that is an atrocious and a dreadful thing to say. But if Mr. Starmer or Sir Keir Starmer wishes us to get involved in a hot war with Russia, if the talk of conscription is reality and not just some sort of chimera, then for heaven's sake, let us look to the example of our fathers and grandfathers, the things they went through in the 1935, 1937, 1938 political administrations, and prepare ourselves for war. I know it'll be painful, but if we wish to deter a war, or if we wish to fight a war successfully, we can't do it with a tiny army, a navy with no ships, and an air force with no aircraft.
Has this been deliberate, though, thinking that we would be in some kind of Star Wars war? Because we have nuclear protection. We have a, well, apparently they're not going so well, but we do have nukes. France has nukes. But if we're on our own, if America doesn't come to our aid, how long is it going to take for us to prepare? Because the first thing Putin will do is start preparing.
Well, I think you'll find that Mr. Putin is already very well prepared. He has now an army of 1.2 million troops, around 60 or 70% of which are regular soldiers. The image that the Western media likes to give of a chaotic, badly organized, poorly disciplined, poorly trained Russian army is just wrong. They're big and they're powerful and they're battle hardened. They've had plenty of experience in Ukraine. And if you enlist a soldier for 3 to 6 years, in other words, he's a regular soldier, which is what most of the Russian army is now, why are they being enlisted for that period of time? It's not like conscripts that you let them go after a year or 18 months. There's only so much marching across Red Square that you can do. I have absolutely no doubt that Russia foresees a war with NATO coming fairly shortly, and she is preparing. Russia is preparing. We need 5 years to get ourselves, a properly funded 5 years to get us back on the footing, to try and deter, I'll use that word again, deter war with Russia, not go pell-mell into some sort of conflict, which is what Sir Keir Starmer seems to be advocating.
And what sort of level of recruitment would we be looking at in that 5 years to be prepared?
I think if you wish the army, I leave the Navy and the Air Force out of it because they are clearly much more technical, but if you wish the army to be ready for a land war, which they can sustain over a period of time, probably with up to 3 divisions in the field without getting too technical, I would have thought we need to be looking at 160, 170,000 men and women who are capable of fighting. Currently, we have around about 70,000 troops under arms, and at least 20% of them cannot deploy.
Wow.
We can't fight.
I mean, how much does that worry you as a former
as a former officer, it appalls me. It appalls me. But then on the other hand, there's a very good argument for saying, well, are we really ever going to get involved in this sort of stuff again? Is it just rhetoric that our politicians talk about going to war, etc., etc., etc.? If we are not going to go to war, if we haven't got the means, if we don't will the means, if we don't have the courage and the political balls to do it, then for heaven's sake, stop wasting money on these things. Why? It's like having a Jaguar outside the front of the house and not being able to drive it. You've got to make a decision. Your armed forces are either credible or they are not credible. Currently, our armed forces are not credible. To rebuild them into a fighting machine will take more time, take money, and political determination. All 3 are missing.
Yeah, my producer and I were talking before the programme and came up with the theory that, or the absolute solution to war, and that is that once governments have decided to go to war, that all politicians and their children are on the front line, that they're the first wave. I reckon we'd find a diplomatic solution pretty quickly.
I'll go. If you want an old, fat, grey, knock-kneed, I'll go willingly. I'd be delighted to go, but you'd have to be pushed to want me.
I'll come with you and interview on the way. Colonel, thank you. It's been a real joy. Thank you so much for joining me. Colonel Patrick Mercer, OBE, former MP and military historian. Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK. Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. And the phone in at midnight is about our veterans. And I think we should talk about all of our veterans, although of course it was victory in, well, the start of the celebrations for VE Day, which is actually on Thursday, the 8th of May. Today, I mean, we do this stuff so well, don't we? This sort of pomp and circumstance and, you know, the fly pasts and all of that, the beautiful colours and the marching bands and all of that. We do that so well. If only we put as much effort into supporting veterans, wow, what a country this would be. Because I can't help but look at VE Day with a sense of pride, of course, but also a sense of, but how much do we really care about these veterans? How much effort do we really put into them? We celebrate them this one day, or Thursday there'll be another bit of celebration, presumably. But what about ongoing? What about looking after veterans every day? What about putting some of the money that would have been spent today, and rightly so spent today, right? I have no problem. I think it was beautiful. I think it's the right thing to do. But I think we should be celebrating veterans every year. There should be a special day that we remember what these people do today as well, the sacrifices that they make today and the sacrifices that we're going to have to ask them to make tomorrow. And those sacrifices are things that we don't think about enough. You know, you don't think about the mum who's away with the Navy and her kids are growing up without her at home. She's made that sacrifice in order to defend this country. I mean, I have a brother who's in the Navy, who's a submariner, and you know, the amount of time that his wife and 2 kids were on their own is an extraordinary amount of time. I mean, he commanded a submarine and was away and out of contact even. And we forget, we don't think enough about the veterans. But I do also want to hear from you about the veterans in your family, about the quiet. They were, honestly, the amount of vets that I've interviewed, and I've been very, very lucky, and just seeing the quiet sort of power that generation had. And I asked the question, and I asked it of Colonel Patrick Mercer, if we could do that again today, and he thinks we can. He thinks that the young people are there and that they would step up and they would do it. Do you agree with that? So lots to talk about at midnight, and I hope to get some really nice stories as well. I was clearing out parts of my wardrobe today, and I found a pair of Land Army trousers that I'd bought in a second-hand shop years and years ago. I love them, corduroy Land Army trousers, and I haven't been able to fit into them for a while because they're tiny, but I can fit into them now, so I may start wearing them. But it made me think of the people who were at home, who had to be brave and had to give sacrifice and had to give service to this country in order that those 2 wars could be won. So give me a call. I'd love to hear your stories. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. And joining me now is Alex Three Lions Irons, TalkSport presenter and producer. Good evening, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Hello.
See, I spoke to you like a human being then.
Yeah, is Humphrey not there?
No, Humphrey's not here. No, Humphrey and Bailey are at home with my sister.
No.
You're looking very handsome tonight. What have you done here?
Thank you. I've trimmed my face. As in, I've only got half of my face left, so the beard has been...
That's what it is. Right, let's talk what happened over, well, let's say it's the season for promotion. Do I get promoted?
That would be nice if we all did, but unfortunately, I don't think that's the case.
No.
Although, if the bosses are listening, I wouldn't mind one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But what was an incredible title race in the championship came to a fitting end on Saturday afternoon. It ran all the way into stoppage time before Leeds United finally pipped Burnley to the post. Both sides were Centurions. It's the first time ever that in the championship 2 teams have been promoted on 100 points or more. Both of them finished on 100 points. Manor Solomon's last gasp winner at already relegated Plymouth Argyle meant Leeds matched Burnley's win over playoff chasing Millwall just as the home fans at Turf Moor were gearing up for a massive party. So Leeds go up as champions. They knew it was in their hands, but they waited until the very end to clinch the title. And we'll be seeing them and Scott Parker's Burnley in the Premier League next season. They weren't the only team in the Football League to hit over 100 points. Birmingham City in the division below in League One, they'll be promoted to the Championship as champions with a record-breaking 111 points this season. It's the first time in the Football League's 137-year history that 3 sides have earned a century of points in the same campaign.
Yeah, Kev was telling me he went up to Birmingham to watch the Birmingham Fulham match.
Yes, the Aston Villa Fulham game, and as a Fulham fan, I won't be talking about it because Fulham didn't do very well.
No, Kev wasn't very happy, I don't think.
No,
either.
I bet he wasn't. I'll see him in the week and he'll complain about it.
Yeah, he definitely will. Luton, they have suffered another relegation.
Yeah, so Luton were relegated from the Premier League last season, we might remember, and it hasn't been a great season for them this season in the Championship. It's been so bad that they finished in 22nd place, which is the last and final relegation place. So in 2 successive seasons, we've seen Luton Town relegated, and it wasn't that long ago that they were a National League side and worked their way up from non-league all the way up to the Premier League, and it looks like they're now sliding back down the Football League pyramid. They lost 5-3 away at West Bromwich Albion, who have had a pretty substandard season this season by West Brom's standards. But it's been a pretty tricky ride. Of course, Rob Edwards was the manager at Luton for quite some time. He left earlier in the season, and Luton never really looked like they were going to pick it up from there. Although Luton had originally gone 1-0 up against West Brom. They then ended up going 3-1 down, and then the game slipped away from them. But at one point, they clawed it back to 5-3. And I looked at my phone with 5 minutes left and thought, they're not going to be able to bounce back from that, surely. And unfortunately, for those of us that like a bet, it didn't happen. Not that I put any money on it, but I'm sure someone somewhere must have done. And it's a shame to see Luton fall as quickly as they have. As someone who, I live in that northwest pocket of London, which is, there's quite a lot of Watford fans around here, which I'm pretty sure aren't sad that Luton have been relegated again because those teams are rivals. But when they came up into the Premier League, there was such a fresh air, a team that had never done it before in the Premier League era, a team whose ground gets mocked for essentially when you're in the away end, you have to walk through someone's back garden to get into the stand. And it's those kind of charming grounds and charming football clubs that we don't see a lot of in the Premier League anymore. And it's, hopefully we'd like to see Luton potentially bounce back up again and give it another go. But at the moment, they've been sliding down the tables. They're not the only team to do that. Of course, Swindon have done it. Wolverhampton Wanderers have done it. And in recent times, Sunderland did it, although they look like they could be clawing their way back up into the Premier League. And as a massive side as Sunderland are, it would be good to see them back in the Premier League. Because
it's not just a case of you've been relegated, but there's less money, isn't there? And everything else goes down.
There's a lot less money.
Yeah, so that's why it really matters. It's not just you've got fewer points, so you're not as good as we thought you were, but everything else goes with it.
Yeah, exactly. Players go, they're not able to get the same wages at Luton if they're in the Championship. Even in League One, they're not going to get big money, so they'll go somewhere else, and they'll have to get players who know that league better and try and work their way back up again. Like, we've seen two teams backed by big money go up from League One this season, those being Birmingham and Wrexham, who will be in the Championship next season. They'll be demanding big wage. Their players will be demanding big wages for next season, and they can draw players in again. There was talk at one point, like early last week, of Jamie Vardy going from Leicester to Wrexham. So, and he would be on big money if he was to go there. I don't think that's going to happen now, but it's, for Luton, their wallet is going to shrink, and their pool of players that they can bring in is not going to get any bigger. And if they are to try and
so it's a kind of a downward spiral, isn't it? Really,
yeah.
Once you start slipping, it's like being at the top of a hill and running down. The momentum increases towards the bottom.
Yeah, if they're not careful, they could slip into League Two, and they could slip all the way back into the National League again. We've seen a former Football League side be relegated from the National League this afternoon, that being Dagenham and Redbridge, who weren't that long ago were doing quite well in League Two, and they've now slipped into what will be the National League next season after a late comeback from Solihull Moors, who they were playing against yesterday, earlier today even. So yeah, it can very quickly spiral into being, losing your place in the Championship to League One, to losing your place in the EFL altogether.
And of course the payment for the games is less as well, isn't it? The TV companies and things like that.
TV companies. So in regards to fans coming in through the turnstiles, you'd expect prices to be lower, but that doesn't always happen. But in regards to TV rights, there is less money for clubs further down the pyramid because there's less TV money to go around. But they are now starting to put games further down the EFL on TV, on Sky Sports Plus in particular. I'm pretty sure you can watch quite a few of the games. I know all of the 12:30 kickoffs that were happening across the Championship on Saturday were all on TV, so you could watch whichever ones you wanted to. But there are a lot more games on TV now. But even so, it's not anywhere near the same amount of money as you get for the Premier League. No.
What about the London City Lionesses, though? They've been promoted. Does the money follow that promotion?
Well, they've been promoted to the Women's Super League for the first time ever. They're backed by Michelle Kang, who is, not very quietly gone about her business since taking over as a Lioness, since taking the Lionesses over last summer. With promotion to the Women's Super League, she's now done that very, very effectively. They played Birmingham City on the weekend in what was a pretty much winner-takes-all clash between them and Birmingham. Both teams looking for promotion, and London City Lionesses only needed a draw or more to secure promotion and hold off Birmingham City, which they did do. They drew 2-2 at St Andrews earlier in the weekend. So there is not as much money in the WSL as there is in the Premier League, but there is starting to be a movement now where we see a lot of the bigger clubs do well in the WSL. Arsenal do very well. Chelsea have won 6 in a row. They confirmed their title earlier in the week. And, the bigger clubs are getting involved. Man City, Manchester United, Liverpool are in there as well. And London City Lionesses will be replacing another South London side in Crystal Palace. So we are seeing the same names come through, but there is money to be made in the WSL, and players in the upper echelons in the league are going to get paid more. But what makes London City Lionesses so different is the fact that they are the only independently owned women's football team to be this high up the table. They don't have any affiliation with any other club. They currently ground share with Bromley, but they have moved around in previous years. And it looks like they're doing it in a way which is actually quite exciting. Michelle Kang, who I've mentioned, she does own a few other clubs, but she's really taken hold of London City Lionesses and really made them quite a force to be reckoned with. They were originally a part of Millwall's kind of setup up until 2019, but they split since then, and if anything, they've done quite well on their own since then.
And finally, the worst kept secret in football, finally out.
Yes, finally. We've been talking about it for weeks over on TalkSport, but Trent Alexander-Arnold has finally announced that he'll be leaving Liverpool at the end of the season. That has confirmed what had seemed to be an inevitability. Got my words out eventually. Stick my tongue back in my mouth. That's been on the cards for months now. And
where's he going?
So, again, not really a well-kept secret. He hasn't said this, but talk has been for quite some time that he'll be heading over to Spain to play with Jude Bellingham at Real Madrid. This came about around about Christmas time or New Year when the two were seen spotted together in Madrid. And, there was talk of Trent Alexander-Arnold not potentially signing a contract. Him and Van Dijk and Mo Salah, those three have been in contract talks for quite some time. The other two in Salah and Van Dijk signed theirs for at least another year or two, whereas it looks like Trent is going to be going out on a free to Real Madrid in the summer. Quite a lot of Liverpool fans are upset that he's going. I think more so on a free that they are than anything else, because he's a born and bred Scouser. He's a Liverpool fan, and I think a lot of Liverpool fans feel betrayed of him going in the way that he is going. But he has been there during the best of times in recent memory for Liverpool fans, and I feel, as someone looking from the outside in, as a supporter of a club that doesn't win anything. So maybe my view is slightly skewed in this way, but I think they should be a bit more grateful for what he's done and going to a club which
people have a
I don't
right.
think. And
they have a right to move on, right?
yeah, exactly. And of course, if you're a footballer, you can't ignore Real Madrid coming after you. If Real Madrid want you, you go.
Yeah.
There is nothing that's going to stop you.
Quite. Alex, thank you very much indeed. Alex, Three Lines Irons, TalkSport presenter and producer. Stay where you are. We're talking to the editor of Chef and Restaurant magazine next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good evening to you. This is Talk, and just to remind you, coming up at the top of the hour, Phil Dave will be in the studio to go through the papers for Tuesday. Now, though, I'm introducing a new feature because food, the language of everything, really. But it's very difficult at the moment to find decent places to go that are cheaper and decent chefs and all of these things. So we thought we'd invite along Claire Bosey, who is the editor of Chef and Restaurant magazine, to kick us off on this VE Day. And I do have to declare an interest. She is my sister. But she is also legitimately Chef and Restaurant magazine editor. Claire, lovely to see you.
Good evening, how are you?
Very well indeed, thank you. I hope you're well too. Now listen, VE Day, I'm sure you had the perfect tea this afternoon prepared by your own fair hands. But for Thursday, people will be having teas. We've got 4 days of celebrations. What makes the perfect tea?
Yeah. Yep. So, being in the job that I'm in, I can pick up the phone and speak to very many chefs. So I have spoken to a lot of pastry chefs all over the country this afternoon because I wanted to pin down. There are so many families and friendship groups and colleagues that maybe think about putting on an afternoon tea this week. Wanted to pin down exactly what are the sandwiches you should be having on your afternoon tea and exactly how should it be presented. So the consensus is that an afternoon tea should be served in 3 elements. So you start with your finger sandwiches, and those should be a cucumber, smoked salmon and cream cheese, which apparently was a favourite of the late Queen, coronation chicken and egg mayonnaise.
Yeah, coronation chicken. I love a coronation chicken.
Coronation chicken. Those should then be followed with warm scones with clotted cream and preserves, either strawberry or raspberry.
Right.
And then after that, you finish with a variety of homemade cakes and pastries, and of course Battenberg, which is actually my least favourite, but it's quite traditional to have a Battenberg or a Victoria sponge on the final course of your afternoon tea. And this should never be confused with high tea. High tea is different to afternoon tea. High tea is actually a meal where there's more substantial. There might be an omelette, there might be a pie. Apparently it's called a high tea because you would sit at a table, so you'd sit high up. Afternoon tea, it's supposed to be leisurely. You're supposed to be sat down and comfortable and reclining and enjoy your afternoon tea.
And of course, a lot of places now do teas, don't they? That you can go out for tea. Now, tea is now the thing, apparently. Fizzy tea is now the thing.
Afternoon tea has become in my industry, hospitality. It's had this massive revolution over the last few years. There's now an afternoon tea awards every year, and it's big business. You go to some of the leading hotels in London, and you'll see they're doing 120, 130 people for an afternoon tea service, and it's a particular attraction to visitors to the UK. They come to the UK, and it's such a traditional thing that it's a British tradition. So if you want to have something truly British, then come for an afternoon tea, not just in London but all over the country, really.
I mean, I think the last afternoon tea I went to was with a friend a few years ago now. It wasn't cheap. No. But then I suppose all those pastries and everything, it really wasn't cheap. I thought, crack it, I think it was nearly 30 quid a head.
Yeah, look at the ingredients that are going into in particular. You've got the best butters, the best chocolates, the best eggs, the best everything. Quality it's not cheap these days, and afternoon tea is a substantial meal. I mean, I don't think I know anybody who could have afternoon tea and then go out for dinner, because it's quite a substantial meal. So I think it would replace either lunch or dinner. But I can only imagine that there's thousands of people preparing afternoon teas for this week. Bunting. Apparently bunting, that's another really important element of afternoon tea. And apparently in Buckingham Palace, they made bunting out of bits of leftover material, red, white and blue. So I'm just kind of scanning around here to see what I can chop up for you to make some bunting.
Yeah, no, leave my curtains alone, all right? No, leave the curtains. I've just paid for them. We don't need bunting. Listen, another great tip that you've got actually is because a lot of people are, we're all a bit broke at the moment, right? But we still want to treat ourselves and we still want to go out for a nice meal. And this is a tip that you gave me a few years ago, and I took your advice, and it was a really excellent bit of advice. And that is where to go for immaculate table service and really good food for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah. So tomorrow I'm actually going to one of these places, and it's culinary colleges. So tomorrow I'm going to Westminster Kingsway, which is in Victoria, and it's a School of Hospitality, and in that college they have 2 restaurants. They have an Escoffier Room restaurant and their Vincent Rooms Brasserie. Now, these are restaurants that are open to the public. And it's not just London. There's University City in Birmingham. You've got Loughborough, have got their Radmore restaurant in Loughborough. In Sheffield, there's a Silver Plate restaurant. In City of Glasgow, in Belfast, in Eastleigh, in Hampshire. So all over the places, wherever there's a culinary school, if they're lucky enough, and their sites are big enough, they'll have restaurants that are open to the public, where the food is cooked usually by the graduating year student chefs and front of house. They'll be in their third year, they'll be leaving to go into the industry, always under the guidance of some really very talented chef lecturers, and often with input from professional chefs as well. I mean, all of those colleges I've just read out, some very well-known chefs will go in and help these student chefs with lessons and with master classes. And honestly, you know, Escoffier restaurant at Westminster Kingsway, a 7-course tasting menu, £45.
It's amazing.
Right? This is a food, and the reasons.
And the ingredients are extraordinary as well.
Yeah.
They don't skimp on the ingredients.
They don't. The ingredients are extraordinary. And you know, and the food, you know, they're all under supervision. But the reason why it's so important for people to go to these colleges, yes, you're going to have a fantastic meal at a fraction of the price, because it's a working restaurant, but it doesn't have to pay staff for a start. It doesn't have to pay for the building rates and everything, so they can afford to just make a little bit on it, but not a fortune. But it's really valuable experience for the chefs and for the front of house students. They do ask you for feedback. You don't have to give it, but all the feedback that you can give these is that they're going to leave and go and work in other restaurants. And then, of course, you know, the extra bit of cash, it does help these colleges that are underfunded at the moment, especially with courses like hospitality. They need to make extra money where they can, and you know, and it's not just the restaurants. You know, Westminster Kingsway College, they've got a whole patisserie section, and it's run like a patisserie in France, and you can officers can order afternoon teas to be sent to their offices. The same at Loughborough. You can
and chocolates. They do chocolates at Westminster Kingsway.
They have a 80-bar chocolate
really good, yeah.
Chocolates. And Loughborough are open for homemade cake between 10 and 12 every day. So I would really urge anybody, if they've, you know, obviously you have to stick to term times, and off that, you know, they're not open all the time. So each college will have different evenings or different lunch times when they're opening. But it's really worthwhile, if you've got the time, to just check out where the local culinary college is that's near you and go along and book a table, because yes, it's exceptional value, but you're also really helping these students and helping the college as well.
Because these kids need to learn what it's like to cook under pressure, what service is like, so they need you to go. I mean, you could look at it like you're doing them a favour by going in and having a really good meal. But also, like with Westminster Kingsway, they sell you know, these kids are kids, I could say, these students are making bread, they're making patisseries, they're making chocolates, and they're not taking them home for mummy, right?
No,
so sell them, and then the public can go and buy them. Really, the chocolates at Westminster Kingsway, our Kingsways, are stunning. In fact, bring me some back tomorrow.
Oh, please, tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, well, so anybody who lives near Victoria, honestly, you pop into the front of the college at Westminster Kingsway, and they've got freshly made baguettes and sourdoughs and all these different breads which you're buying at a fraction of the price that anything else would cost you. It's extraordinary, and all these culinary colleges will do that. They'll also go out and do events for you. If you have an event, speak to your college as well, you know, because there's a very good chance they could come and cater that for you.
I mean, that is amazing. It's such a good tip. So check out where your local culinary catering college is and see what they've got on offer, because honestly, it is an absolute bargain. Really, really is. And you get excellent service. Everything is like a posh restaurant. It's just done by students.
And you could be cooking. You could be being cooked for by the next Gordon Ramsay. You don't know. You know. Well,
I know Gordon goes to Westminster Kingsway, so he's helped out a bit. Now, just very quickly, National Barbecue Week coming up. We attempted to barbecue a lamb last September. We did all right. Ended up in the oven. But a few very quick tips. We've only got a minute.
Okay, so swap out your meat for fish. I spoke to the UK fisheries consultant, Mike Warner. We're an island nation. We're surrounded by fish. there's lots of reasons why you should be buying. Fish is seasonal and regional, and so Mike's tips for the moment of fish that you might not know of that are coming to season: tub gurnard and thornback ray wings and John Dory. Also, very, very quickly, I spoke to my friend Tom Brown, best seafood chef in London at the Capitol Hotel. He said, make sure your fish is dry. So when you buy fish, make sure leave it a day or two to dry out. Make sure the skin is dry. Olive oil, salt, pepper onto a very hot grill. If you want to marinate a thicker piece of fish, you should marinate to something like monkfish or gurnard. Lemon peel, garlic, olive oil, and dry herbs. Marinate it. If it's a thinner fish with lots of flavour, mackerel or skate wing, brush the marinade on while you're cooking it. But we're surrounded by seafood. We should be eating more seafood.
I agree. And it's quicker and easier to cook. Claire, thank you so much. Thank you for all that advice, and we will see you in a few weeks' time. Claire Bosey there, editor of Chef and Restaurant magazine. Right, coming up, we're going to be looking through the papers. I wonder what's on the front pages. Phil Dave will let us know.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just said it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is a Talk and this is Petrie, and with me in the studio is Phil Dave, editor and broadcaster.
Oh, hello.
Hello there.
Hi.
Did you do much celebrating today of the first of 4 days of celebrations of VE Day?
I feel slightly ashamed because, to be honest with you, I always had it in my mind that Thursday was, if you like, I was going to say D-Day, which you know what I mean, VA Day being Thursday. And I suppose I was sort of somewhat distracted by the fact it was a bank holiday and I didn't really necessarily do that much to mark it.
Were you in work today?
No, I wasn't working. No, I was sort of doing bits and pieces from home, but other than that, I just sort of might have also been a touch hungover from the weekend as well, so might have just let the days slip by and not completely appreciate the significance. Sorry.
It is interesting because I think a lot of people have been thrown to a loop on this because, as you rightly say, it's the 8th, which is Thursday, but I think because of the bank holiday, it was deemed a good day if you were going to have street parties or
it makes
and for the
perfect
royals to
sense.
do that.
I just stupidly didn't pay attention for some reason. It's not that I did, I did obviously catch bits of it, but I just had other plans, and had I have really thought about it and planned properly, I wouldn't have made those plans and actually focused on what mattered.
Yeah, I had sleeping planned.
Oh, well, I suppose that works-ish. Celebrating in your own unique way.
In my own unique way.
You were dreaming about it
I
instead.
was dreaming about it. But it's an interesting thing, isn't it? We put all this money in and all this attention to veterans, and rightly so, from the Second World War, when we look at the sacrifices that were made. But it does always make me think that those sacrifices are ongoing by our armed forces, and we don't really show them the love, perhaps, that they deserve.
No, and
on an ongoing
tell you,
basis.
Well, I tell you how I know that we don't show them the respect and love that they deserve is, well, there's a number of things. First and foremost that springs to mind straight away is when you see people who are veterans who are homeless. And that is, I just don't think there's ever an excuse for anyone who has served their country.
Much of that, I mean, I did a documentary on homeless veterans at one point, and much of that is to do also with mental health problems.
Absolutely.
And that's why they would end up being homeless. And we don't support them enough in that regard.
No, I mean, they should be supported above everyone else as far as I'm concerned.
Agree.
They have made the ultimate sacrifice, in terms of sort of they have dedicated their lives. They might still be alive, but they have given their lives of what could have been. And because of the trauma that they've been through, that is why they've ended up where they are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just because they've got a pulse, it doesn't mean they haven't made the ultimate sacrifice.
No. And also, the other thing that turned up in this documentary when I was wandering around the streets of London, it was that I did the interviewing of these vets, was that when they're in the military, they are ill-prepared for civistry. Often a young man or woman will join at the age of 18, 17, 18. They are then in the military, and they're told when to wake up, when to go to sleep. They're fed, they're watered, it's very regimented, pun intended, and everything is kind of done for them in that regard. And then maybe 6 years later, if that's how long they've signed in for, that's by then. And they don't even know how to. When I was doing this documentary, there was a nun who was helping us. She was a heck of a swearer. She was known as the sweary nun, and I had to edit her so tightly because she was really cross. And she said, these young men and women, they don't even know how to get rent. They don't know how to rent a flat. They don't know how to get a job. They don't know how to write a check in those days. They don't know how to get a bank account. All of these things, they're not taught an exit strategy, which also adds to why we see so many veterans.
Which is actually one of the
streets.
reasons why I'm always banging on about how this sort of thing should be taught as standard in schools. I don't understand why it's not part of the education system. If it happened to be a part of the curriculum, then actually we would see everyone better equipped for life and whatever it throws. So, I mean, that's just another example. I mean, yet another thing I could think of to demonstrate how little respect we show for our veterans and indeed our armed forces is the way that it feels as though at every step of the way that people are encouraged to hate the UK. Well, what bigger insult can you offer to people who are fighting to keep the UK as we know and love it by saying hate your country? The two don't go hand in hand.
No, they
at all.
don't. They really don't. And also, you've got a situation where you've got soldiers coming back from things like Afghanistan or Iraq, or even doing UN duty, where there's no parade. There's footballers get a parade if they win a cup, but these men and women, when they come back, they just.
Get on with it, yeah, absolutely.
What was that? There's no big thank you. There's no, there's nothing. And I'm very passionate about the armed forces, and
rightly so.
And rightly so. And I spent a lot of years working alongside these men and women, a lot of years, and they are just the most extraordinary people, wonderful human beings, and we just so badly let them down. And so when I look at the pomp and ceremony of today, absolutely, it is absolutely the right thing to do, but it does make me question whether it's just lip service.
Oh, I 100%. I think it is basically just because there'd be outrage if it wasn't done. That's all it is. I don't feel like it's done from the heart.
Yeah,
anymore.
that it's not really this massive thank you that it should be.
Yeah, it's certainly what it feels like anyway. Yeah. And look, I'm not going to sit here and be a complete hypocrite, because I think if I was asked to serve in the military or forced to, I don't know how I'd react. I don't know how I'd feel, because I'd be absolutely terrified. I'd openly admit it. I'd be absolutely petrified.
But there are so many jobs in the military as well. There's geekery that you could do.
Oh, I would very happily do the
geekery.
Yeah, I'd very happily do that.
You just have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go for a run.
I'm used to that.
That's true.
We're
all used to that,
That's a lie for me. What are you talking about? Up at 5 in the morning? You make it sound like a bad thing. I thought that was standard.
No, you're right, aren't you? I used to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go to work in the place we worked at before.
I was already awake.
Yeah, you were already in, preparing the programme. There's so many jobs in the military, and we're just talking about catering and things. The most brilliant people are the people who cater, and I remember in Bosnia I used to plan my filming schedule around where the best meals were.
Standard.
Standard. So you'd always make sure you were in Tomislavgrad on a Friday, because there was really good curry on a Friday. So I don't know. I have to go to Tomislavgrad and do some filming there. It's definitely because there was a really good curry.
I wished I thought you were joking. I
I'm
know
not
you're
joking.
not.
I'm really not joking. And then you make sure you're in Vitez for the weekend, because the Sunday roast was exceptional, really, really good. And so I would just plan the whole thing around food. But that's how you keep an army happy.
I was going to say, it's the way to an army's success, right?
Yeah, they march
enough food to feed an army.
But I tell you, they're honestly so good, and they do an amazing job. They have to source things locally, you get loads of things sent in as well, and deliveries and everything. But yeah, really good.
Well, I tell you, sort of the nearest time I ever sort of saw to a kind of like SAS kind of lifestyle was, that a couple of years ago I undertook this challenge to climb Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
And I mean, I
still can't believe you did.
No, I must admit, I think I'm mad. But
we know
I know I am. But anyway, but when I underwent that, obviously you had to have a certain level of physical fitness in order to be able to take part and to do it. And so I was doing quite a lot of training in the run-up to it. Well, I mean, I watched exercise videos, but
that's training,
in my view.
Much, yeah.
I just sort of sat on the sofa whilst I was watching them, but at least I watched
Same
them.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I got the idea. I was cheering on the people in the video. Anyway, the point is that it obviously was quite strenuous, quite full on, and I thought, wow, I'm a bit blown away by doing this for 1 week. And yet there are people who have to sort of endure conditions like that, pack up their tents, carry it on their back. I mean, I didn't have to carry the tents, thankfully we had people to help with that, but there were certainly things that we had to carry all the way. And when you're just thinking to yourself that you've got virtually zero oxygen going on, and you have to be at one with nature, shall we say, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
And I thought there are people who do this for weeks, if not months, if not years on end. Yeah. And I just think they're amazing. To get on with it and not complain, and then to top it all off, have to fight for their country to do that. Yeah. That's not just a case of sort of you go for a nice little walk like I did. It was they actually have physical fighting involved as well. It's insane. It's amazing.
And all of the stuff that they do, and all the different departments, if you like, of the army, particularly the engineers who get there first, set up the laundry. For example, you don't even think about having to do things. The engineers are amazing, and they go in and they set up all the camps and everything, and then the soldiers come, and then everything else has to happen around that. And it is a well-oiled machine. It is quite extraordinary to see, bases set up and how Vitez, for example, changed over the years that I was there. It is just breathtaking. And of course, there'd be a pub as well. Got to have that. You got to have that as well. Not that it was a holiday for me at all, really much. But anyway, extraordinary people, extraordinary, and they deserve much, much more of our love and thanks, even the veterans of today. Right, let's have a look at the papers and start off with USA Today. It's very interesting that the USA Today has gone with a very big story on the Pope, without the photograph of Donald Trump dressed as the Pope, cosplaying as the Pope, which has infuriated Catholics around the world. But they're talking now about conclave, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I guess the anticipation begins now, doesn't it, really? Because, obviously having had over a week now since the loss of Pope Francis, well, it's nearly 2 weeks, actually, I suppose it's 2 weeks, actually. 2 weeks since the loss of Pope Francis. And, of course, speculation grows ever as to who's going to succeed him. You know, I think everyone can hazard a guess because obviously there are only so many cardinals it could be, but at the same time, no one ever really knows. I don't actually think people knew Pope Francis was going to be selected. I think that they vaguely remember them suggesting someone else was in the run.
And it seems that they want to go back to a much more traditional style pope, so they've probably already got an idea.
I was going to say, and I don't actually think there'll be many people who object to that, you know, because Catholicism is steeped in tradition, and if you have someone who's a bit too forward-thinking, it doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with the nature of the Catholic religion. And that doesn't mean to say that Pope Francis wasn't a good chap. I'm fairly sure he was very well intentioned with most things he did. I've said before, I'll say again, I never agreed with everything he said politically. In fact, quite often I would disagree. Quite fundamentally, I disagree with a lot of what he thought politically. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that he wasn't well intentioned. It doesn't mean to say that the next Pope won't be, but I don't think we'll see someone as, for want of a better term, fluffy.
Well, he was more thinking of a future for the Catholic Church away from the very strict boundaries, and a lot of people didn't like that. So conclave starts on the 7th, which is Wednesday, and there will include a maximum of 4 voting rounds each day until a candidate obtains a 2/3 majority. A compromise candidate would ultimately emerge, but for the first few rounds of voting, the cardinals may each be willing to repeatedly vote for their preferred candidate and see whether he gains momentum. And then, of course, we would then get the white smoke.
Yes.
Every day we will see smoke come out of the Sistine Chapel, and it'll be black smoke to begin with, and then white when a pontiff has been chosen.
Now, I did know this, but I almost bet you'd know off the top of your head, because you're full of sort of facts and stuff like this. I can't remember how it is that they actually colour the smoke. I can't remember how. I did remember sort of reading about it.
Yeah, no, they throw a powder onto it, don't they?
They do something with it, but I can't remember what it is.
I don't
actually make it coloured.
But they throw a special powder onto it, but I don't know. I can't remember what that powder's called.
No, I'm pleased it's not just me who can't remember.
No,
but I did remember reading about it once. So I was quite fascinated by the whole process.
That changes the colour of the smoke. Have you ever been to the Sistine Chapel?
I have. Well, I've been to St Peter's Square. I have done that because I was in Rome, but I didn't actually sort of go into Sistine Chapel.
Amazing.
But I mean, even just being in St Peter's Square was just remarkable.
Well, I went there, and the dome, the very famous dome that actually you can see on the front page there, is double-skinned, and there's stairs that you can walk up on the inside of this dome.
So it's a bit like, in that case, St Paul's Cathedral.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Oh, terrible.
I mean,
because
it's so narrow that you can't. Only one person can go.
Yes, so that's exactly like St Paul's Cathedral, because I did that with.
I had a panic attack. Wasn't good.
I'm not surprised at all, because I have to say very quickly, because I used to sort of thought what we were referring before about the place we used to work. I used to do a feature there on air called Tourist Emerging City, because it was very much London focused, this particular place we used to work. And I used to do this thing where I would go to all the different tourist attractions, because it was one of the suggestions was that as Londoners we don't necessarily take advantage of the attractions that are available to us. So I tried to put pay to that idea, and one of them was St Paul's Cathedral. I'm ashamed to say that until that point I'd never been to St Paul's Cathedral. I'd walked past it, of course, but I'd never been inside.
You're not whispered? Whispering.
Well, so that's what I was. One of it was to the Whispering Gallery. Anyway, but I didn't realise, because, again, why would I if I hadn't been inside it, but the actual galleries are in different degrees. You know, they actually have sort of high... I can't remember if I think it's called the Sky Gallery or something like that. It's the tallest one or something like that. Anyway, to get to that one, you have to go up, as you say, this single-file spiral staircase. I got halfway through. Now, just to put this into some context, because this is not just your average spiral staircase, this is a spiral staircase that is attached to what appears to be like one of the oldest, flimsiest iron poles you've ever seen in your life, going up in a vast open space with nothing around you, because you're just climbing up into this dome with nothing, no walls, nothing around you. I got so dizzy and so, like you say, panic-stricken, I actually had to go back down, to the annoyance of everyone who was behind me, because as you rightly identify, it's single file, I couldn't help it. I had to get out. I couldn't do it.
No, I was very similar for me. There's a little window at the top of the basilica there, on the dome, and it's St Peter's Square, and I had to go out onto this little tiny little balcony, and my boyfriend at the time was livid. But anyway, but it's an extraordinary place. But the Sistine Chapel is definitely a sight to behold. Beautiful. So we will have a Pope possibly by the end of the weekend. Everybody thinks this is going to be a couple of days, so we could have one by Friday. So
could be a couple of days, could be who knows how long.
Also on USA Today, activists decry the unravelling of civil rights. The first 100 days of President Donald Trump's second term, his administration has eliminated diversity initiatives across federal agencies, pushed to roll back provisions of the Civil Rights Act, and fired some staffers working on the civil rights issues. So yeah, they've done more to undo decades of civil rights work than any other president in recent memory. So this is people are starting to kick back now.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that there is a happy medium somewhere along the lines. I feel that a lot of people could argue that efforts to try and implement diversity had gone a little too far the other way in both America and in this country. And there are plenty of people in this country who actually cry out for similar actions to try and sort of claw back how far we have gone. Now, that does not mean to say that I, like many people, don't believe that just because someone happens to be of a different background, whether it be different sex, different sexuality, different coloured skin, whatever it is, of course everyone should have a level playing field to be able to apply for something.
Yes, it doesn't make them worse at their job.
It certainly doesn't. But what does make someone worse at their job is if they have been given for that reason, if you see what I mean. If someone has been employed on the basis of their background or their sexuality, whatever it may be, rather than their skill set, that's where a lot of people have a problem with it.
I honestly don't think that happens as much as people think, because if, for example...
It shouldn't happen at all.
For example, if you've got a dentist, you're not going to get somebody who's not qualified as a dentist just because they happen to be a woman or a person of colour.
But then that's not what we're talking about here. And believe me, as far as I'm concerned, I've very openly and happily said that I don't care what someone's background is at all. I know that some people get very hung up about it. I don't care, as long as they're right for the job. And the only way you can truly make it right for the job, someone right for the job, is by looking at their skills. What are their abilities? Put them to the test if you have to. There are some people who use the argument, yes, but then some people don't necessarily have the same career history as others because they've not been given those opportunities. Be that as it may, you know, some people, everyone has to start somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's not a case of just because exactly the same.
I mean, I wish the world was a meritocracy, but it ain't.
Fine, but then you can't necessarily sort of go around positively discriminating, which I hate that expression because discrimination is discrimination as far as I'm concerned. You can't positively discriminate in a bid to try and make that the case. The only way you're going to do it, I believe, is to do what I'm not the only one who suggests this, there's plenty of people who suggest this, is when it comes to the point of employment, it should be done blind. It should be, you shouldn't know the name of the person, you shouldn't know the sexuality, the sex, whatever it is. All of that should be off the table. You should literally look at the CV and you should see candidate one has these qualifications.
I completely agree.
And that is the only way you're ever going to achieve it.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. Also, on the front page of this is a slightly worrying statement. When Trump was asked whether he would be upholding, whether he believed in upholding the Constitution or whether he would be upholding the Constitution, he went, I don't know. Slightly worrying.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a choice. I mean, Constitution is Constitution to some degree. So, I mean, even if he signed any executive orders, which he loves...
Well, let's hope.
The truth is that
it's got to be
the
tested
Supreme
in the
Court
courts.
would overturn it anyway.
Yeah.
So.
But we'll see if he agrees with the overturning, so we'll see. But it is slightly worrying that a man who was supposed to be there just to uphold the Constitution is now saying, oh, I don't know. So that's the USA Today. Before we get on to the UK papers, let's take a quick break, shall we?
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you, and with me is Phil Dave. And we're going through the papers. The FT appears to be our first pick, and Macron condemns Trump's assault on universities as Europe lures scientists. So there's a lot of scientists that have had their money, federal funding taken away from them in universities, and we're all going, hello, over here, hello, scientist, brilliant scientist, come over here. So this is what's happening.
It is. There is something. I feel like this might be a bit of an understatement. You'll certainly tell me it's an understatement. Something quite unnerving about some of the decisions that Donald Trump has been making of late.
Really unnerving.
Look,
yeah.
As I was explaining to you during the break, and I will say it again, it's very tricky for someone like me who has a lot of Republican tendencies, someone who thinks very much politically the way that many Republicans do, to see a Republican president in the White House again. Obviously, personally, I'm very pleased by that. I couldn't stand the Biden administration. I'm absolutely delighted we've seen the back of it. But at the same time, it's
hard to defend.
It's very annoying that, so in spite of that, that the Republican president that we've got is Donald Trump. And
350 million people.
Exactly. That's what I can't get my head around, is that surely there must be something that tells Americans that their political system is pretty badly broken. It's a bit rich coming from us, because I agree. I think it's the same in this country as well.
I do too.
But there must be something that's pretty broken about the American system when, out of those 350 million Americans, they started off by having to choose between Trump and Biden, and then they had to choose between Trump and Harris. And within all scenarios, whichever way you look at it, even if you go back to when it was Trump versus Clinton, and that's Hillary Clinton, of course, not Bill Clinton.
I mean, even then the Americans were going, look at what we've got. I mean, these are the worst candidates in the world, and we've got to choose, somebody from these two terrible people.
I just think something needs to give in the way that sort of the candidates are ultimately chosen. It really, I know
it's all about money in America.
I was just going to say, I know it shouldn't be, but it boils down to money, and it shouldn't do that.
And the problem is that the circle of people who hold that money is getting smaller and older as they sort of bat away the young people who can't raise the sort of money that's needed. I mean, you've also got to look at how much money can be given by an individual to a political party. All of those things, America, I think, will revise after this administration. But there's another story on the front of the FT about America, and this is the US threat of 100% levy on foreign films. I'm going to be addressing this actually on my show on Tuesday. But Donald Trump's threat to impose 100% tariffs on films made outside the US would be devastating for Hollywood, and it would be devastating for everywhere else around the world. And we don't know what he means. What is the 100% levy on? Is that on the ticket price when you go and see the film? Is it on the production? Is it on the actual filming? I don't know. But this seems to be fairly disastrous, because does that extend to things like Netflix? Does that extend to TV programmes that are made elsewhere? This does not seem to be a very clever, thought-out idea.
It's just very strange behaviour. There's just no other way to describe it, because as much as, again, I understand Trump's thought process that he wants America to become this powerhouse of all industry, and I get that completely, but I don't think the way you go about it, and what do I know, but I don't personally think the way you go about it is by pricing out where you have little choice but to import from at the moment.
But I mean, Hollywood would have a trade surplus with the rest of the world, right? Because Hollywood produces the films and sells them to the rest. So we're all in deficit, actually, to Hollywood. So there's no need for this. It just doesn't seem to make any logical sense at all.
Well, not that I can see it doesn't. And as I say, I mean, I get it. I understand he wants everything in-house. He wants as much as possible for America to prosper. And the only way he can clearly think of doing it is by sort of scaring off the rest of the world, by sticking massive tariffs on them. But as you rightly identify, in a country that is synonymous with really being the birthplace of the film industry, really, how on earth could he think that this makes sense in any way?
He's fed up with the rest of the world stealing the movie industry. It's kind of like, well, we're all allowed to make films.
I was going to say, it's just a case of people making films. It's not really stealing.
It's not really stealing.
You can't claim that something's been made in Hollywood anywhere that you can claim that if you crush a grape in this country, you can call it champagne.
No, exactly.
It's exactly the same thing. You can't make something in Hollywood if it's not in Hollywood.
Yeah. I mean, look, and people will always want to film somewhere else in the world because of the backdrops and you're not going to be able to do CGI.
But I was going to say, what's he going to do if it's a Hollywood production then sort of wants to go abroad?
Well, then they'll be tariffed on it, presumably.
But then that's bizarre. Then that's detrimental to Hollywood.
Of course it is, yeah. The I paper also covers that story. Thousands of jobs at risk as Trump threatens a 100% tariff on UK film and TV industry. He's actually threatening the world with these tariffs. Blockbusters releases include Wicked, Gladiator 2 and Barbie were filmed in Britain, with $5.6 billion spent on film and high-end TV production in 24. That's a 31% increase. And I was speaking to Johnny Hearn earlier, who's our film fella, and he was saying, look, a lot of countries make it really attractive to go and film there with tax breaks and things like that. And so movies in Hollywood, they're going, right, we need this particular backdrop or whatever. And they look at Malta, who give an enormous tax break if you go and film there, and they pay you in advance. So that's the kind of thing that the film industry needs in order to survive.
I mean, I wonder whether or not Trump thinks that he wants it to be like the golden age, where actually they wouldn't go on location, they'd just maybe do it in a set in Beverly Hills. I don't know.
Listen, who knows? I mean, I'm not even going to try and crawl into that man's head. I'm just not. 80 years of the Moomins. How Finnish characters became a symbol of hope and resilience. Do you remember the Moomins?
Indeed. I could never understand how the Moomins could breathe. They don't have any nose.
No, they don't.
That's always... I just remember sort of when watching Moomins, that's the first thing. Anything I thought of was like, well, how do they smell? I mean, what I was going to say... Damn it. Set you right up for that one. But
you
anyway.
did. 80 years of the Moomins. They are delightful characters. I remember them as well.
They're not hippopotamuses.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, I suppose they are supposed to be, of sorts.
Well, sort of.
Yeah.
With hair.
And with no nose.
And this one, I love this little opinion piece here on the eye, just before we go to the break. I bin my kids' artwork and I don't feel bad.
Oh, thank God for that. Honestly, I can't... I'm sorry. Did you ever put your son and Air's artwork on the fridge?
No,
right.
I don't think I put it on the fridge. I have kept some. I mean,
keeping it is fine.
I've kept it in a folder in my memory trunk, which has got a few of his bits and pieces.
That's totally understandable because it's for your benefit then. But the problem I've got is when anyone puts it onto the fridge, right, or they start taking a photo of it, and they show it off and say, look what such and such did. Isn't it amazing? And you're absolutely forced into saying, oh my God, that's so impressive. When deep down you're thinking, I've seen my dog produce something better than that.
Yeah. Mind you, you're now forced when you come round to my house to admire my paintings. So.
Yeah, the difference is you can paint. There's the difference. It's when you've got some sort of infant hand which can't even colour in lines and you're supposed to look at it with some sort of false sense of admiration, looking as if to say how amazing, how talented your child is, when all you're thinking is, honestly, it genuinely looks like you've just tipped a bucket of paint on it.
I mean, what was always the worst was when he would come home with bits of coloured pasta stuck to a crinkled up piece.
Yeah.
And you go, what is that? Lovely. Do we eat it?
I was going to say, that's dinner sorted.
What do we do?
Know what you're having for supper?
No, I have kept some of his stuff, but no, no.
So I don't. Whoever this person is, I don't blame them.
I applaud you. Well done for your honesty. Quick break. Back in a sec.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you. And with me is Phil Dave, a Talk broadcaster and editor. Daily Telegraph, a nice picture of the royals there. It says a lean monarchy.
I see what they did there.
See what they did there, as they all sort of lean over. I think it must be the fly past. But I
hope so. Either that or there's something very shaky in the ground at Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, there's a bit of a collapse on the balcony. Yeah. But goodness me, what a handsome little fellow George is.
Oh yeah, no, listen.
Really? I mean,
well, he's got very good genes. Come on, no, don't be funny. He'd be a bit of a disaster for them if he turned out to be a bit of a.
I know, but he's just definitely sort of grown up into. He's only 11. He looks very grown up.
He's very tall for 11.
He's very tall for 11, but both his parents, as you say, are tall anyway. Here we go. Story underneath that delightful picture. PM prepares for attack by Russia. Fears for a national infrastructure as war plans updated to deal with cyber and nuclear threats. Cyber threats have got to be the I would think the most likely at this stage.
Well, I think I was going to say I think it will be the starting ground, won't it? You know, nuclear is pretty final.
I think it'll be cyber. And just as a point of interest, I don't know this for sure, but do we have a backup studio somewhere?
Do we have?
Yeah.
Technically speaking, yes, we have access to studios that we could use if we had to.
Okay, just wondering.
Yeah. Not necessarily in a different building, as far as I know. I don't actually know if we do have.
No, but I mean in a different part of the country.
Oh, we see in a different part of the country. Technically speaking, there are brands within our company.
I just remember the last.
That we could
not the last place I worked at, but the place before that. There was I remember one time we were sent there for some reason. I can't remember why, but yeah.
Training.
No. This was because of some emergency or some breakdown or something.
Oh, I see.
And it was in Bristol.
Oh,
I think.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know if we've gone that far. I mean, it may well be. It's possible.
Probably
they're so secret that I just don't know about it.
But I mean, for example, if there was a cyber attack on London, for example, and it took down the grid, then we wouldn't be able to broadcast from this Talk Towers. We'd have to go somewhere else outside of London to broadcast.
This is
true. Just asking for,
Well, I would imagine that
pack my suitcase.
Well, I think what we'd most likely do before we did that is that we have broadcast. This is going to be very boring for anyone, but anyway. But we have broadcast abilities that can connect to cellular networks, and as a result of it,
could do it from home.
I was going to say, I would imagine that what we'd probably do is we would use something sort of cellular data first, before, because then obviously that's not dependent on satellites.
The reason I'm asking, it's not just specifically for us, but there will be a lot of companies right now who are for cyber attack reasons making contingency plans, and I mean we've seen what's happened.
It worked so well for Marks and Spencer's.
No, it didn't work for Marks and Spencer or the Co-op now.
Or Harrods apparently as well.
I know, but apparently that's this spreading spider or whatever it's called. But
is it taking the web by storm?
Oh, very good. But it's I'm
sure M&S will laugh about it one day, but they're probably
not right now. But Russia, if Russia were to attack, I don't know, satellite feeds or something like that, then there'll be a lot of people who have to come up with a plan B. A classified dossier will set out how the government would respond to a declaration of war, including bunkers to protect the cabinet. Oh, great.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So
what about us?
Them that start it get somewhere safe to go.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah. Don't you feel so safe knowing that lot are the ones who have to lead this country if we ever were to go to war? Well,
I was just saying earlier to Colonel Patrick Milson, I was saying to him, I said the thing to do is, if once war is declared, that politicians and their families are on the first wave.
Yes, I heard that. Brilliant, absolutely.
First wave.
Let them be on the front line, and then they'll soon change their minds.
And then they'll soon change their minds. They won't be sending cannon fodder. So the Kremlin officials have repeatedly threatened the UK with a direct attack over its support of Ukraine. Yeah, they don't like us, do they? Experts have warned that the UK is vulnerable to an assault on its critical national infrastructure, including gas terminals, undersea cables, nuclear power plants and transport hubs.
The way that we could
I've got a wind-up radio. I just sit there and tell it it's rubbish.
As opposed to going on the radio and winding people up. Yeah. I mean, I would say that the best way that this country and all countries really could prepare is to actually sort of say, look, we've possibly over the last several decades become a little too dependent on the internet.
Would agree on that. Yeah.
And actually what we need is the ability to be able to switch to something a little more analogue if needs be.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do. I mean, even to the point where now people aren't actually encouraged to learn to write properly anymore.
Yeah.
You know, even something as simple as that.
No, I mean, even if I had to go to my wind-up radio, I don't know how I would find I don't know the frequencies of anything. I just think because you don't, do you? You just go online and go talk or whoever you want to listen to, and it pops up.
Yeah. No, it would be tricky, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Iranian plotting terror strike in the UK has links to Tehran regime. This is really worrying. The special forces and the police have just arrested or just disrupted terror cells that were imminently, like hours away from an attack on the UK soil.
Well, I mean, I wish I could say I'm surprised. I'm not at all, to be honest with you. I mean, who knows what we've got lurking amongst us, the way that people just come over here in their droves unchecked. But I will say one thing, that until the West wakes up and realises that the biggest threat to the world at this moment in time is the Iranian regime, then I fear the Western world is going to be in for a very rude awakening one day.
Yeah.
Because the truth is that whilst we are distracted with the likes of Russia and China and what have you, which is true, they could pose a threat in their own way. China need the West's business in order to carry on doing what they're doing, so they're not going to do anything to us for the moment. They can threaten all they want, but the truth is they need us and they're not going to do anything. And Russia, I think, is very much the same, because I think Putin knows that if he was to even think about attacking any part of the West, then NATO forces would come down heavy on him like an absolute ton of bricks, and he'd actually run the risk of losing the USSR that he wants to be back in. So it's just, I don't think that's going to happen. Whereas the Iranian regime, which is absolutely deep-rooted in fundamentalism, which believes that you die for your cause and that you become some sort of martyr if you die for the greater cause, that is without doubt the biggest threat to the West.
Terrifying.
Because it means that they don't care if they die, and they don't care who dies with them.
No, I completely agree, and they're very close to having nuclear weapons.
That's thanks to Obama, that, by the way. People think saintly Obama, and he's the one who went to some sort of stupid nuclear deal with Iran in the first flipping place. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, to try, you can't appease these people. This is what I've always said.
I don't want to appease them personally.
No,
I don't think anyone should.
But appeasement just doesn't work. Trump may send migrants to Rwanda hotels built by Britain. A Rwandan accommodation paid for by British taxpayers could be used to house migrants deported by Donald Trump as part of a possible deportation deal. The Rwandan government will discuss housing people removed from America in facilities that were built by the UK. Well, I hope he's going to pay us for them.
Well, I was going to say, I think we should impose tariffs on them if we do.
So do I, yeah.
If he's going to do that, then I think that America needs to pay a very heavy price to have it. So anyone else who wants to use the Rwanda hotels can use it at this reasonable rate.
Well, they'll be queuing up to go there rather than El Salvador. I can tell you there'll be many more people happy to go to Rwanda than El Salvador.
But at the same time, I suppose it does go to show at least that it hasn't gone to waste, even if it doesn't necessarily benefit Britain.
The Rwanda scheme cost £700 million of taxpayers' money.
Oh, bargain.
And just 4 migrants were sent to the African state, all voluntarily.
Wow.
The cost of the scheme included $290 million in payments to Rwanda. So I think Britain spent at least $318 million to pay for asylum facilities and boost economic development in the country. So that was, well, let's hope that Trump will pay us. He'll need to save his money, though, because he wants to open Alcatraz.
I know that people get very twitchy about this. Personally, I think that I don't have much sympathy for people who are in prison, if I'm honest with you. If someone breaks the law...
But it's crumbling. It'll have to be knocked down and rebuilt at an enormous cost, and it's just... I don't know.
I don't really care what conditions prisoners are in.
I don't know how many people... He's saying, well, you can't escape from it, but I haven't heard there's a massive problem in their big prisons that we know that of people escaping. So I think this is just because he's perhaps watched Escape from Alcatraz.
Well, whatever it is, the upshot is that I don't really give a hoot enough about the conditions that prisoners find themselves in. I have a very simple theory in this life: if you don't want to be in prison, don't break the law. It's really not difficult.
No, it's more to the point of why everyone's going, out what? It's a museum. It makes $60 million a year. Anyway, let's take a break, shall we, before we come back to the Daily Star.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you, and with us is Phil Dave, who is going through Tuesday's newspapers and the Daily Star, back to their former form. Thank goodness. They got very serious at one point. I was almost at the stage of phoning them. Sort it out.
No one would want to be on the receiving end of that phone call, believe me.
No.
They'd be in big trouble.
I actually shouted today for the first time in about 10 years. But anyway.
Not at me.
Not at you, no. Daily Star. In a country not far away, Trump turns himself into Darth Vader. This was sent out by the White House's official account of an AI version of Donald Trump. He must think he looks like... Mind you, his medical report practically said that this is what he looked like. 222 pounds, 6'3". This is what
I don't think this is what he looks like.
I don't think this is what he looks like.
I think he looks more like a Satsuma underneath.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because the tweet that went with it, or the message that went with it, was saying, those loony lefties and the evil, wrongdoers, and yet he's standing holding a red... What are they called?
Lightsaber.
Lightsaber,
thank
you.
With the Darth Vader hat on, though. So I mean, it's just a.
But he wasn't wearing that hat in the original. The Star have put that on.
Oh, okay.
But he was holding the evil lightsaber, because if you're a good person, you hold the blue one.
No, but one would assume it was red for Republican. I don't think.
The message is the Sith, isn't it? I mean, that's the message: is that he's evil. because only the evil ones, and I don't even know this films franchise, whatever.
I started watching it again on Sunday because it was
I had to look it up.
National Star Wars Day. So.
There was was it? Oh, May the
4th be with you.
Yeah, so I had to look it up because everyone was going, does he know what the red lightsaber stands for? And I was thinking, oh, is it something rude? I don't know. I don't know what it stands
No,
for.
it's not rude. It's just it's from the Empire. So basically,
it means the evil ones. So there you go. Yeah. So there's that image of stop with the AI. What is wrong with you? Can you imagine if Obama or Biden had done that?
Well, I don't want any of them to do it, to be honest.
No, it's ridiculous.
Just run the West
pathetic.
to get on with it.
Just get on with it. Stop cosplaying the Pope and a blooming whatever that is.
It's playing dress up.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Idiot.
There you go. Next to receive a phone call from Petrie.
Daily Mail. I tell you what, a monster has been unleashed by the shouting. Daily Mail. This is what I thought we were going to have on every single newspaper, Phil.
I did as well. I was really quite surprised because, and I'm also in some weird way, I'm quite disappointed, to be honest, because actually it's a golden opportunity for all the papers to be united and to say, do you know what?
Thanks for what you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a beautiful picture there of people on the Mall. In front of Buckingham Palace and flags everywhere and all of that.
The Mall was rammed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which was actually quite reassuring to see so many people wanting to be there.
I was actually quite surprised, but we turn out, don't we? I mean, that's the thing about the Brits.
Well, I mean, because I was lining the streets when it was the King's coronation.
Oh, really?
Because I was quite determined to be a part of it. I took a wrong turn. I didn't mean to. Not joking. I actually wanted to say that I'd been there.
Yeah.
You know, and I took a video of Their Majesties in the carriage going past, and I'd probably say in terms of distance between where I was and the King and Queen were, I'd probably say that, I know this doesn't mean very much to anyone listening to this, and I'm sorry, but probably from where you and I are sat now, it was probably double that, and that was how near I managed to get.
That's pretty good. I can't bear a crowd. I can't deal with it.
I didn't like it, but I did tolerate it because I thought I just had to.
I'm 5'2". Everybody is taller than me, and it just feels like I'm being smothered.
I felt very smothered. It was horrible, but it was something I wanted to do.
Yeah, so. No, that's fair enough.
I never wanted to do again.
But it wasn't too hot today, I suppose. It was,
That's true.
It was all right. But yeah, a lot of people there looking like they really are enjoying themselves. So that's the Daily Mail. The Mirror, fabulous photograph of the fly past where they had a mixture of planes actually in the fly past. I think they had some typhoons there as well. But anyway, and they did the fly past was, yes, it was Red Arrows and Typhoons. See, I just recognised one.
Well done, you.
A day to remember. But you don't normally see the typhoons with the red arrows. So
also, I was reading something about the red arrows being retired, I think.
Do you know what? They're always talking about it because they are very expensive, but they are such an important soft power.
Oh no, I don't think it's a case of they'll be retired and nothing will replace them. I just think it's actually the aircraft themselves need to be changed or something. I mean, I could have made that up, but I'm pretty sure I did.
They are absolutely the best of the absolute best. But they flew, I think, all over the country. Well, not all over the country, but they were fly pasts in different areas of the country as well, which is new. But what a display! They are. I think they're the only squad that can fly in a Diamond 9, which is literally as it sounds, 9 aircraft flying in a diamond shape. Other countries do a Diamond 6 or but the Diamond 9 and you can, if you were able to freeze frame them and measure the distance between, the precision is breathtaking. I mean, these are the best of the best. I mean,
it's hard enough to do that. It's hard enough to do that with cars. Do you know what I mean? On the ground, but actually in the air, to be able to do that is just incredible.
It really is. The skill level is extraordinary, and I think I'm right in saying that this squad are the only ones that can do a Diamond 9. It is absolutely breathtaking.
I have to say as well, I'm quite impressed with the way that the Daily Mirror, I don't often say that, but I'm quite impressed with the way the Daily Mirror has seen fit to actually reprint some of the 1940s papers, the edition of the Daily Mirror from the 1940s. You can see just in the bottom corner there, headline from the Daily Mirror in the 1940s, 400 killed in biggest London bombing. And of course that would have been a headline from that
1940. Time. Yeah. Extraordinary. No, they've done a good job there. That's an exceptional photograph. And I'm not even going to ask how they got that. The Sun newspaper, again, has the...
They've got a wraparound.
Oh, that's why I've got it like that. See, right. This is the royal... Oh, look at... Doesn't she look formidable? Princess... She's really scary, but she's in her...
Is it military?
In her military... and King Charles there, and Queen Camilla, and of course Prince William, George, Kate, and Charlotte, and what's the other
Louis.
one? Louis, thank you.
You know,
great picture.
I actually think that the King looks remarkably well, given what he's going through.
Yeah. No, he does. He looks great. They all do. That's a brilliant picture. Awe and peace. Royal family led the nation at the start of a spectacular celebration marking the 80th anniversary of VE Day. Great picture. And that slimmed down royal family. No, wasters there. I wonder who I could be thinking of.
No, I
can't imagine.
I have no idea.
The Daily Express. Daily Express, another fabulous picture. That must be the fly past again, because everybody's got their phones out. Yes, it is, I think.
Everyone lives their life through their phones.
I know, it really is.
Actually, speaking of which, I was saying before about when I was in the lining of the streets when the King's coronation was happening, I remember thinking to myself at the time, yes, I want to record it, absolutely I do, and I did record it on my phone, but I don't want to look at this moment through the lens. I
might
want
as well
to
stay
remember.
home and watch it on
So
tape.
what I did was, I remember I actually sort of rested my phone, this is going to sound ridiculous, rested my phone against my head to keep it steady, and also to be able to see what I can see, but whilst I was looking at it with my own eyes, and I don't regret that at all. People around me thought I'd gone bonkers, but it's a look I'm perfectly used to. But at least I managed to see it with my own eyes, and I managed to record it. And I was really happy with actually doing that. Yeah,
it's a shame, isn't it, that people missing the fly past by looking through their phone. But yeah, I mean, look, the joy on people's faces as well. There's a little lad there. I don't know whether you can see him. He's sort of maybe a quarter of the way in from the left-hand side. He's a great big grin on his face.
Yeah.
Just looking up at the aircraft. Amazing.
Really I like the way Daily Express have also said they're basically the headline, if you like, is actually sort of the words of Winston Churchill. So on the 80th anniversary of VE Day, so Winston Churchill's words still ring true. I'll go with that.
In the long years to come, not only will the people of this island, but of the world, wherever the bird of freedom chirps in human hearts, look back to what we have done, and they will say, do not despair. Brilliant. They've also got the Daily Express has got pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20 and 21 covering the...
Do you think it'd be easier just to say which pages don't cover it?
Yes, probably. The Times, nothing. A little sidebar. A salute to royal history for VE Day anniversary. I don't know whether that's a salute to royal history. They should have gone more on the vets, but I'm a bit disappointed by that.
Look, at least there is a picture of Princess Catherine and Prince Louis. So I love the way that they always try and catch Prince Louis in a very awkward pose, a very awkward face. He's a very expressive sort of chap.
Yeah. But I would have thought that they would have done more than that. But anyway, the other story, visa curbs on nations said to hike asylum bill. The Home Office will restrict work and study visa applications from nationalities including Pakistanis, Nigerians and Sri Lankans who are most likely to overstay and claim asylum.
At the very least, it would appear as though that there is an attempt, albeit weak, faint-hearted or what have you, to do something about the levels of immigration, but I think what people are most worried about is the illegal migration. Yeah, I don't think they worry about legal migration. I don't think
most people do. I think it is that very obvious sign of people just coming in and not being stopped. But I mean, maybe Reform doing so well will actually kick Labour up the backside to address these issues. They've certainly been warned.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a very loud message from the British public to the Labour Party saying, look, you think you know what the British public want, you haven't got a clue.
Well, I mean, it's always been said the right will only rise when the left fail. So, they've got to stop failing, and it's as simple as that, really. Phil, Dave, thank you, darling. And I will see you tomorrow. Anyway, so coming up, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about veterans, and of course, because of VE Day, which is on Thursday, officially the 8th of May. But we have 4 days of celebrations now to mark that historic moment where peace was declared over Europe, not quite the world, because of course Japan and America were still at war. So let's talk about veterans. Let's hear some stories about the veterans in your family, not just World War I and II, but also perhaps veterans of today. And maybe if we treated them a little better, then more people would be willing to be protective of this country and join up. So give me a call, 0344 499 1000. You can message 87222.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. This is Petrie and this is Talk, and we are now just beginning day 2 of the VE celebrations, Victory in Europe celebrations, which of course the official date was the 8th of May 1945. And of course that gives us all a chance to look back on those days. Many of us were clearly not around during that time, but it is still our history, and it is still living history, because although many of the soldiers that took part and many of the people who stayed at home, who did a lot of the work at home, are no longer with us, there are people who are still around, of course, who were alive 80 years ago for VE Day and even before. So they were brought up during the war. And it is very much, I think, still an incredibly important part of our history, and should be thought about and talked about more than we do. The late 30s and early 40s in this country would have been absolutely brutal. We know that. People who remained, people who lost their lives in bombing campaigns, people who lost their lives in munitions factories, or died because there wasn't the attention being paid on healthcare and things like that. And the sacrifices that the British people made, although many, of course, had no choice, but there was rationing and things like that, they did make sacrifices, and many of them made those sacrifices without really complaining. I mean, if you think about today, if your Uber delivery is late, we get all flustered about it, or if an Amazon package doesn't arrive the very next day, it's like, oh God, how am I expected to wait? We're not used to sacrifice. We're not used to that sort of, inconvenience in our lives. Could we do the same today? Could we be the same country as we were back in those days of the 40s and 30s? Are we the same peoples? And were our men and women made of stronger stuff? I mean, you had kids trying to join up. They were lying about their age because they wanted to go and fight for their country. I don't know whether we would have that situation in this day and age, and I don't know whether we would have people prepared to put up with the sacrifices that many of our relatives were prepared to make. But looking at today, did that fill you with pride? Did it make you feel more patriotic about this country? We do these things extremely well. I mean, just look at the precision of it, the well-oiled machine that is the military parade, the fly past, all of those things. We are extraordinary at it. There's not a country that can touch us. There really isn't. But when I see these parades and see this national gratitude, if you like, for the men and women of the 30s and 40s, and earlier, of course, with the First World War, do we still maintain that gratitude today for the soldiers, the men and the women that join up? About 77,000, that's all we've got in an army at the moment. But why don't we show our appreciation more often? So I'd like to hear from you if you are yourself a veteran of the military. I mean, it doesn't have to have been something that the war that was fought 80 years ago. I'm talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, other things around the world, Somalia, Northern Ireland, Bosnia, all of those places too, where British forces were sent in our name to defend peoples and to defend democracies and to support people in their moment of need. We are an extremely generous country, an extremely brave country, and our soldiers, our men and women, our sailors and our airmen and women are still out there. They're still working, and we get veterans all the time, people who have served and who have left, and we ignore them. So I'd like to hear from you if you are a veteran of the military, and how you feel, what made you join up, what made you want to be in the military. In my view, the people that I've met and I've met hundreds, if not thousands, of serving personnel in my life. I worked for 9 years very closely with the military, and they are bloody brilliant. I mean, honestly, just fantastic people. They're the first people. They raise the most money for charity. They do anything for anybody. They are an extraordinary group of human beings. They really are. And if you've ever known somebody who's served, you know that to be true. You know that to be true. There's something special about them. And I don't know whether they're special and then join up, or they join up and because of that service and because of the work that they do, they become special. But one way or the other, these are truly extraordinary human beings. They really are. They're the best of us. And they are not thanked often enough. They're not supported well enough. And I looking at today and feeling pride for the veterans of yesteryear, it makes me worry that we don't have that same feeling about serving members right now. those men and women who are working extremely hard right now, often in very difficult circumstances. Often, even if they're out on military exercise, people die on military exercise. They're not playing. These are not games, and these men and women sign up for a reason, and they sign up not just because it can be a brilliant career, but also because they believe in something, and they believe perhaps in this nation. And so I'd like to hear from you if you have served, if you're thinking of serving, if you wouldn't ever serve. And I'd like to know if you are the children of veterans, maybe you had your mum or your dad in the Second World War, or a grandparent or something like that. And what does it mean to your family? What does it mean that you had this amazing person in your family that gave up so much so that we could worry about an Amazon delivery being 2 days late? What did they sacrifice for? Where are we in this country? So do give me a call. I would love to hear your stories. 0344 499 1000. And do you think that if we showed our appreciation more, that we might encourage people to join up? We need at least 120,000 more soldiers, and we've only got 77,000 at the moment. So over the next 5 years, those are the sort of numbers that we need. How do we encourage people to defend this country? Give me a call. You can send me a message as well, 87222, put the word talk and your message, and I shall read that out. Dave is in Manchester. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Hello there, Dave.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Did you see much of today?
Yeah, I was watching it.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Did it make you? Did it make you feel proud?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was nice to see the King and everyone there. And I see that the veterans sat with them. But I was getting a bit agitated by the comments, that were coming through on YouTube. People just people writing stuff on YouTube that were just
saying what?
Well, they basically just saying things like, well, most people write things like "Free Palestine" and stuff. They're just completely uninformed and
hijacking something that is a sacred memory for us. That never improves anything, right? This is our day. Yeah. This is our time. We're allowed to be proud of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody, I try not to respond. Somebody actually wrote, "Who cares about this?" And then he wrote, "We need to stand up against the right-wing fascists." And I wrote, "Yeah, we did. They did."
That's exactly what we're celebrating. You know what I mean? Yeah, the irony, stupidity.
Yeah. So.
But you have your grandfather.
Well, I mean, my dad is Polish. I mean, he was raised in England, but he didn't speak English till he was 14. But his mother, if I could just talk about her 1 second, my grandma is still alive. She's 95 now.
Wow.
She's still alive. She told me everything because my grandfather would never speak about it. He died in 1998, but and he didn't tell anybody about it, but apart from her. So. A few years ago, I was asking her. She told me about him, but she was from Łódź. It's spelled Lodz, but Łódź ghetto, and so she was. But she was orphaned by before the war started.
Wow. So she would have been in an area where the Nazis set up camps.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but her father was he was just a womanizer, and her mother turned out to be just a young girl that he was messing around with on the side.
Right. So a really tough start to life.
Yeah. She kept basically they said she committed suicide, my grandma's mother, but she didn't. What she would do, because he kept getting her pregnant, so she would try and terminate the birth, and she did it a couple of times, but then she did it one day and bled to death. And
backstreet abortion.
Yeah. Gosh. My grandma was 8, I think, and her sister was about 11, I think. And then, so her father took her then to an orphanage, and when the Germans invaded, she was separated from her sister, and ended up working in Germany. So she spoke Polish, but her first language was German because she was basically worked on a farm. And the fact she was Polish Catholic and not Jewish was the reason she was alive. You know.
Yeah.
Some of the things she told me, and so anyway, yeah, she's had an incredible life. Her mother was called Stella, and she never had any memorial for her because they bulldozed all the graveyard and stuff. And then, so her first child, who I never met. Sorry, I can't hear you. So.
No, I'm listening.
Oh yeah, so basically, so her first child, I never met her, my Auntie Stella. So she was named after her, but then she died when she was about 21. So it was that was here in England. So my grandma's had a very tough, sort of life. Yeah. Anyway, to get to my grand, so I asked her about my granddad. He was a great guy. I got on with him really well, but. So he was from Lvov. Now that's Ukraine now, but it was Poland when he was there. And he, he was born in 1925, so we would have been 14, and the Soviets invaded Poland, and so they were just in the house, and the Soviet soldiers walked in and shot his dad in the head when he was just in front of them. Took him and took his mother. God knows what they did to his mother, but then he ended up briefly reunited with his mother. They were working in the fields, and they would give them a cup of water and a piece of bread.
Slave labour.
Yeah, and all that's what they survived on, a piece of bread and a cup of water. So being his mother, she would give him her share, to try and... so one day she just dropped dead in the field and she was starved to death,
God.
So he buried his mother, and then he hid in the forestry, and he would eat grass and things like that. He did what, but he managed to find his way, back home, and he would visit an auntie who would feed him. But he couldn't stay there because they were looking for them, so he had to go and hide in the. Now, I think it was around 1941. When there's a guy called Vladislav Anders. Now, my granddad's name was Vladislav as well. A guy called Vladislav Anders, who was a Polish general, was released from a Russian prison, and he basically recruited a lot of young guys. So my granddad joined his army.
Wow!
And this was Anders' army. Now he was too young, but he joined anyway. Now, what my grandma told me that what he did at first was because he spoke fluent Russian. He spoke Italian, Russian, German, and Polish and English. But he not at this time, but when I knew him. But he spoke fluent Russian by the time he was sort of 14, 15, and he would gather information from the Russians and then bring it back and. So then what that became, when the British. Basically joined in. The Polish Anders' army was formed into the Polish Second Corps, and so my granddad fought for the Polish Second Corps. And I've read things by the British Special Forces who say that the Polish Second Corps they say they won the war, but the way they think, a lot of them were just rebels, rebel soldiers. And
wow! This is a blooming movie.
Well,
That's extraordinary.
I do act and stuff, and I write scripts and stuff. So I'm trying to put something together. But yeah, so he fought this last battle he did. He fought at Monte Cassino, and so I have his papers from when he came to England. He came from Italy, So he fought at Monte Cassino, which was just God knows how they won that. It was amazing.
I mean, that is grit and passion, and isn't it? That at that stage when you start looking at numbers. Yeah,
absolutely. So from then on, from after Monte Cassino. I mean, obviously there's a lot more to it, but that's there was no home to go to. Basically, they had nothing left. So they ended up in England. I mean, he did. My grandmother had been working on farms. She was, but some of the things she told me were horrendous. But like her father being basically just a horrible. He was from a very rich family, so he was able to he was quite. He was okay, even though he was Polish. He was fine. You know, his family knew a lot of the Germans, and but he just left his children in these labour camps and farms and stuff. He knew they were there. And my grandmother found her sisters, because there was a younger sister as well who was only a baby, but I don't think she was her mother's baby. You know, I think she was anyway. She missed the boats to America, so they went to America, and she had to jumped on a boat to England. I mean, I wouldn't have been here otherwise, but you know, it's very sad. And she met him in Oldham. She was working in a cotton mill, and so I mean, she's lovely. You know, she's great. She's very. One of the funny things recently was because she's very. She's always been very devout Catholic and stuff like that. Now, I've not really followed religion, but you know, she. They're trying to downsize at my Auntie Angela's house where she is now, and just throw some stuff out on that. And my auntie gave me this statue of Mother Mary and Baby Jesus. It was a few weeks ago. So I said, can you imagine being that person throwing that in the tip? So I went to the Catholic church up the road, and I told the priest about it, and he said, I'll take it. So he took it, and then he asked me if my grandma would like him to go and talk to her, and which I thought she'd love that. So I told my Auntie Angela, and then she said, no, absolutely not. And I thought, that's weird. And then I thought to myself, you know something? Maybe at 95, she's had cancer as well. When she got cancer, I said to her, are you okay? She said, I'm okay. I said, well, you survived the Holocaust. You know what I mean? You might be okay.
This is what I'm saying about this tough. You know, I said earlier on, these people have got a quiet steeliness about them, right?
Winning sort of, if you've no choice, then. But, but she's great, but she didn't want to see the priest, and I said, you know what, maybe she's actually sat there at 95 thinking, John's pretty much let me down here.
Maybe she's just worried that he's gonna speed things up for her. I wouldn't want them anywhere near me. But to learn all that about your grandfather, how did that make you feel? I mean, that is an extraordinary, amazing story.
There were funny things, that made me. I knew that there was. I knew he'd obviously been through something, because they all have, haven't they? I mean, my mum's dad, he was a funny guy, because he was a medic. He drove an ambulance, and he transported medical supplies. He didn't have a driving license. They said, well, you better learn to drive quick, because you got to do this, They laughed, but in terms of my granddad,
the bravery of doing that as well, driving a blooming ambulance, which isn't, particularly, modified to be protective, into the front line to pick people. I mean, that is extraordinary.
Yeah. So so that's my mum's dad. That's my dad's dad. He always enjoyed it, because I used to do a lot of boxing and stuff when I was growing up, and I remember being sent home from school one day when I was about 15, because I'd been bullied, so I had a fight, and I got, having won the fight, I got sent home from school. I didn't want to go back home, because of my dad. My dad's worked in the Middle East for many years, and he was home at the time, and I'd been in big trouble, so I went to my grandma's house instead. And my granddad gave me this talk about how, because I told him what had happened, and he always said to me, you must, you did the right thing. You must never, ever allow, I thought, wow, okay, fair enough. And it makes sense to me now when I found out, that's instilled in him,
you don't let bullies win, right?
No, absolutely, which, I mean, obviously you can't lie down and just take it. I mean, you can be as nice as you want but, you don't let people do that. So.
Well, we know that, we're just saying in military terms, we never, appeasement doesn't work with a bully. No. They just take you for being weak, and that's the problem. That's what happened after the First World War, really, which led to the Second World War. But you've got to write all this down, David. You've got to...
I have actually. I mean, because I do write and stuff like that. I've got...
That's an amazing story, really incredible.
Great,
what they all went through. Do you think we could go through that now?
Well,
if we had to?
If you have to, you have to, don't you? Because I don't think many of them were conditioned, were they? I mean, they weren't as privileged.
No.
But I think.
They were used to a life without heating and inside bathroom, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Which we're all a bit spoiled now. But like I was saying, we worry if an Amazon parcel is late, and these people were working as slave labour in a farm.
Yes, I mean that would be a funny script actually. If you a film about a bunch of kids now that would have to do national service, could you imagine telling them they had to shave their hair, and it would be
and have their mobile phones taken off them so they couldn't be on TikTok.
It would just be, But again, I mean, one of my best friends was in the Marines. He was he served in Basra and Sierra Leone and things like that. And but he was bred like that because his grandfather and his father and all, they were all Marines, But he even says his son, he's just said, there's no way. There's just no way he'd be able to do it,
I do wonder, because people who've served are very special, and whether it's the service that makes them special or they're special before they serve, I haven't quite worked that out yet. But
well, do you think maybe they were hoping that this wouldn't happen again?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the First World War, didn't they say that was the war to end all war?
Yes, it was, and a few short years later, and then there's and look, the man's capacity to fight is and to be disgusting is ridiculous, isn't it? That knows no bounds. We've learnt nothing from history. We've learnt nothing, about the Holocaust, about fascism. We're seeing that rising around the world, and it's just like, why are our memories so short?
And I think this time as well, the frightening thing about this time is it seems to be like the minds are a bit muddled into what is right and is wrong, because it looks to me like the people that are in the wrong are the ones being treated as the victims,
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. It's bizarre. The whole world seems to have tipped on its head. I'm not entirely sure how we write it, but I love that phone call so much, Dave. Thank you so much. I loved it. Thank you. Great call. I've got to take a break, but I will be back.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This.
Hello there, good morning. It is Petrie here with you, and we are talking about VE Day and what memories that might have kicked up for you, like Dave talking about his granddad and his grandma. I mean, that is an incredible story. I'd watch that as a movie, I tell you. But, you know, there's a lot of those people who just didn't tell many people about what they did and what it was like. And I still know that to be true from modern conflicts as well. We've got veterans who are still suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder from, you know, Afghanistan, Bosnia, all over the world, Iraq. And we just don't look after our veterans very well, I think. And I think that if you want to recruit people to do those jobs, then you've got to make sure they're well looked after. And you've got to make sure they're well looked after while they're in service as well. You've got to make sure their accommodation is good, that their families are looked after, their health, and, you know, all of that is taken care of. We've got to look and pay them properly. I mean, that is another thing as well. Loads of messages coming in on this. Gary saying, I remember as a child having a conversation with my grandpa about his time in the war. He was a quiet man, a few words. I hear this all the time. But he told me how he felt an obligation to fight and protect his family and country despite the fear he faced. He didn't go into detail. A few years later, after his death, my gran told me how she, as a young woman, also did her bit making ammunition, weapons and bombs, and that I should be grateful that my grandpa opened up about it because it was a subject he never spoke about. I feel disappointed nowadays that in remembrance of this day, I don't think the younger generation appreciate the sacrifices our war heroes have endured to give us our freedoms that we all take for granted today. And Gary, thank you for that. And I completely agree with that, because, you know, the further we are from a conflict, the more diminished those living memories have become, the closer we are to the next conflict, because people forget. And a few months ago, I don't know if you remember, I did a phone-in about why the younger generation of today had been polled, and they said that they would prefer a dictator to the system that we have at the moment in government. Not the party particularly, but the system of voting. I can't be bothered, you know, all of that. And that proves that point brilliantly, because, like I said, the further we get from those living memories, the closer we become to the next war. Because we don't remember. We didn't live it. Those young people of today didn't live it. They didn't live rationing or the suspension of normal day-to-day life. They didn't live the constant threat of bombs on their streets. They didn't live working in munitions factories where many women died because of explosions and things like that. They didn't live having to, you know, be evacuated as children from their homes and their families into God knows what in the countryside, where children were abused and taken advantage of, and all sorts of horrors happened. Some great stories as well, but all sorts of. They didn't live that, and because we don't really teach it. We don't really talk about the sacrifices that were made in this country by everybody, and then the ultimate sacrifice made by those soldiers who went to fight overseas in the worst kind of hell to defend those people back at home. And the further we get from that, the less we talk about it, the less that we really consider it and put ourselves through the emotional pain of what happened, we become complacent, and then we just wander into the next war, because there's not enough people going, look, do you remember last time? It was hell. Let's not do that again. Let's not go there again. Let's do everything we can to stop this war from happening. And I'm afraid at the moment there's a lot of men banging their chest and being the big I am, who will go nowhere near, by the way, the front line. You know, all these, I was reading earlier in the paper review, the contingency plans for bunkers for our MPs, for the politicians, the ones that start the blooming war, the ones that are incapable of stopping a war. They go to safety. There's bunkers all over this country, you know, where they will go if they push Putin into sending a nuclear weapon. Not us, not the rest of us, the ones that start it. There's not enough living memory or consideration for that memory. Gary, thank you for that. No, this is from LOL. It says you were talking earlier about the excellent military chefs and cooks. Oh my God, they're so good. Well, there are barely any now. It's absolutely disgusting. Raw food, minimum nutrition, food often undercooked. These people don't realise an army marches on its stomach. I am admin on a group which supports the mums of soldiers. Our kids are always sending us photos of this rubbish. I mean, that is such a shame. That is such a shame, because they were brilliant. Absolutely brilliant and so hardworking, unsung heroes completely in feeding us. They were amazing. I'm really heartbroken to learn that that is the case. That is really sad. I mean, some of the best chefs as well. Imagine this, working on a submarine. I mean, imagine that. They're not getting fresh food, and they have to cook meals every day. They are, again, well, they used to be anyway, absolutely amazing. Joanna from Salisbury has sent this message. My German grandmother was an amazing woman. I don't know how she ever coped. She met my English grandfather during the occupation of World War I, which he also fought in. They came to England with 3 children in 1930, and my grandmother worked in customs and excise. World War II, my grandmother worked in a factory near Southampton, and my grandfather went back to the army, ending up in Germany and then Sudan. Gosh. 2 sons in the Navy and a daughter, my mother, in the Army. She had the missing presumed dead telegram, oh gosh, and then 2 weeks later, without warning, my grandfather arrived at her front door, gosh, and then he was sent to the Sudan. She spent 6 years listening to the radio, not knowing if her family were dead or alive in Germany. One of her brothers, a Communist Party leader, shot himself with stormtroopers beating on the door. He would have been tortured for names. A nephew died on the Russian front. My uncle, years later, ended up in the Falklands War working on a supply ship. What a family. Crikey, that is extraordinary. See, this is the kind of history that we need to know and live and understand and feel. Otherwise, we're way too close to the next one. Quick break, back in a second.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. It is Petrie here with you, and we're talking about VE Day, or days. VE Day is actually on Thursday, as we know, the 8th of May. 1945, 80 years after the war was ended in Europe, when we accepted the Germans finally giving in. But it is, to me, really, really sad that we don't talk enough about how Britain was and how brilliant Britain was, and because I still think it's a brilliant country. Don't get me wrong. I'd rather be in this country than any other in the world. So I still believe in us as a nation, but I think my fear is that because we don't analyse the past enough, we don't think about the past enough, that we are, what is it they say, those who refuse to learn from the past are destined to repeat it. And I think we are at the stage now where we are destined to repeat the horrors that these people 80 years ago, or more than that actually, fought to protect us from: the rise of the far right, the rise of fascism, rearing its ugly head across the world yet again is proof that we've learnt nothing, really. And those millions of men and women that died will pale into insignificance compared to the next several millions of people that will die, and we don't learn. We never learn, and I find that really really tragic as a species, that we have so much and we have such great ability to invent the most amazing things medically and militarily and in every way. We're geniuses. We're fantastic. Our brains are extraordinary, and yet we have a memory problem. And we refuse to learn, which I find such an oxymoron, really, isn't it? I mean, how is that possible, that we are so genius in one regard but so blooming stupid in another? And this is as the front pages are talking about the British government now making contingency plans for attacks, cyber or otherwise, from Russia, who constantly say that they're going to send a tidal wave over us or something, or kill us all. But it's okay, because you'll be glad to know that those in power will have a bunker that they can go and hide in and be safe. So but this is what I mean, that there's no learning here, and the arrogance of these men who are chest beating and going, I want more land, or I want to take Canada, or I want to take Ukraine, or I want, just learn, please, for God's sake. Sit back and live your life. Stop threatening. Why are human beings so rubbish? Why are we so bad at this? You know, war is disgusting. It really is vile, right? I've seen a little bit of it, and I just, the idea of what people went through in the First World War or the Second World War, that even the tiny bit I've seen just breaks my heart and shatters it into pieces, because war is revolting. It smells revolting, it looks revolting, it sounds revolting, everything about it. It's not a game. It's not a game to be won. No one wins, certainly not the soldiers on the battlefield. Nobody wins. It's disgusting. And I think that any Prime Minister, any country leader that wants to go to war should experience it first, themselves, firsthand. Because they wouldn't want to then. They wouldn't. If they knew even what it smelt like, it'd be, no. It just wouldn't happen. But they don't know. They think it's all, I don't know. Ali is in West Yorkshire. Ali, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
You had a grandfather who was in the military.
Yes, yeah, I did.
Tell me about him.
Yeah, his name was Captain Manga Khan, and he was in the British Indian Army at the time when Britain obviously, colonized India, Pakistan, and was one country before partition. So he served in the Second World War. He served.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is it. A lot of people forget this as well, that we drew our soldiers from India, from Africa, from all over the world. Were drawn into the war and fought alongside us. You know, we don't pay enough attention to that either. I know that there's now a memorial, isn't there, on the Mall, but for years there wasn't.
Yeah, he served in North Africa, so obviously it wasn't in Europe, it was on the front in North Africa.
Still, nonetheless, yeah.
But yeah, it was for the British at the time, yeah. And really, I didn't actually really know. I obviously I knew about it, but I wasn't that interested in all the stuff before. But obviously in the last few years, when there's been a lot of like racism and hate risen, particularly against people like myself, like British Muslims, I like to say that when I read stuff that say we have no connection with this country and we don't belong here, I throw that in their face and say, well, my grandfather served this country, so why don't I belong here?
Well, exactly.
They don't have a reply after that.
No, of course not, because they don't think. You know, they don't think about it. They don't think of all those soldiers from around the world who came and fought alongside us. You know, I mean, from everywhere, every corner of the world, and as part of the British contingent, as part of the British military. Would you fight for this country, Ali?
I honestly, if this country was attacked, I would serve for this country. I probably wouldn't be much use, but yeah, if it was attacked, I definitely would. I would fight, but I wouldn't join the army like right now. I wouldn't join, if you know what I mean.
No, I understand that, and I think that a lot of people feel that is that if this country was directly attacked, of course you would take up arms to defend your country. Of course you would. But a lot of people are going, well, I'm not going to go and fight some war in blooming, you know, Afghanistan, for example. You know, I'm not going to go and do that because that isn't in defence of of this country the way you would see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your grandfather, who told you about his past?
My mum, he passed his medals to my mum and her brother, my uncle. They both got two of his medals that year. Just a funny thing about the medals, when India and Pakistan was partitioned, and he went into Pakistan, before he came to this country, went into Pakistan, the only two things he took, my granddad, was a young man at the time, so he was unmarried. The only thing he took was his two World War II medals. That was it.
They were the most important thing to him.
Yeah, that was it. Nothing else. Yeah. He already had family on the Pakistan side of the partition line, but himself, he obviously moved from the Indian side into Pakistan, and that's the only thing he took with him. Yeah, his two World War II medals. That's
amazing, isn't it? That he had such a connection to that's what he took with him. The most important things to him. Extraordinary. And there should really be more recognition of people like your grandfather. And you know, like you said, you know, he went and fought for us. So you do have a right to be here, and you do have a right, the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
Ali, thank you. Good to talk to you. Ali there in West Yorkshire. AJ has sent a message saying, on the topic of fighting for our country, it's a moral dilemma. Our leaders don't promise anything more than a continuation of the status quo, but it's hardly an inspiring mess that we are in. But better the devil you know, I suppose. And AJ, you make a very good point, and I think this is a very strong point that isn't said enough, that the social contract has broken down between government and people, particularly the young. And, you know, they're saying, well, you don't really fight for me, why would I fight for you? And I understand that, I get that. But I do think that if we were up against it and this country was attacked, that all of us would defend it, I think. Well, we wouldn't have a choice. Quick break, back in a sec.
the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning to you. This is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until the top of the hour. And yesterday was, of course, the first day of 4 in celebration of victory in Europe. I'm really quite annoyed, as most of you will understand, although some of you will go, oh, here she goes talking about Trump again. But Donald Trump has been downplaying Europe's involvement in the war. And British involvement in the war. And look, we are so grateful to the Americans as a nation for coming in when they did, to help us when they did, although they really came in for themselves. But anyway, you know, we are grateful, but that doesn't mean we didn't do anything, all right? Please, because by doing that, you're taking away, you're stealing valour from the millions that died in defence of freedom and democracy in Europe at the time under the dictator that was Hitler. So what we don't need is more dictators rising and taking away the glory of those men and women who rightly deserve it. Well, earlier on I spoke to Colonel Patrick Mercer, who's a former MP and military historian, and he started by telling me about his own family's military history. Here's what he said.
My father was a theological student. He was going to be a vicar when he volunteered for the Second World War. He was wounded at Alamein, he was wounded at Anzio, he was decorated. He then left the army and went back to being a vicar. In 1947, he was ordained and off he went. He was an extraordinary man, an absolutely extraordinary man, had no intention of being a soldier. I was a regular. Nothing extraordinary about me. I joined the army because I wanted to. I was there for 25 years. And I commanded very, very ordinary men, a few women, who became heroes and heroines when the pressure was put on them. Do I believe we have those people around in our society today? Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. It may be fashionable to talk it down. It may be fashionable. It may be woke to talk about the fact that we could never, ever, ever face an enemy again. I've even heard men say to me, oh, it's not for me, you know, I'm a coward. I'm a coward. Nonsense. Nonsense. When the time comes, our youngsters will step up. I'm absolutely sure of it.
So it's your view that it's the situation that maketh the man or woman?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, people will say we haven't been to war for a long time. And we haven't had a serious war for a long time, but we've had a number of minor engagements, albeit 10, 15 years ago, Iraq and Afghanistan, places like that. Those young lads, and they were mainly young lads at the time, they fought their guts out. They bled, they died in the sand and the dust for this country, just as much as my father and grandfather did. Now, again, I say it's fashionable to say that we won't do that again. I believe that if the situation comes up where we have to fight for our survival, where the cause of the war is just, that our youngsters will perform like the heroes and heroines that I believe they are.
And when we look at the men and women that did serve, and I had the great honour of meeting a few of them as a journalist, and interviewing many while they were obviously still with us, but there was something so quiet about them. I think that's the only word I can use. That there was this power. It's very difficult to put my finger on it, but there was this backbone of steel, but this quietness from the men and women of that era.
Well, I just use my father again as an example. Clearly, I was born in 1956. I never knew him when he was an infantry soldier. He killed Germans, large numbers of them, but I knew him as a vicar and a man of God. And when I talked to him about this, he talked about the war all the time, not the nasty bits, but the comradeship, the friendship, the loyalty, the courage, the enormous affection that he had for his Sherwood Forester soldiers. But he said to me, the years 1940 to 1946, in my life, my dad's life, they were in colour. Everything else was in black and white. He had a very successful career in the church. It was nothing, according to him, it was nothing to what he did for those 5 or 6 years where he, nothing special, but he defended Great Britain against an existential threat from Nazism. And he was never short of recognizing the fact that what he did, what the Americans did with whom he fought in Italy, really was nothing very much compared with what the Soviets did with their enormous sacrifice to turn back the tide of Nazism.
Now, we're talking about Trump. I don't want to give him too much attention because he gets way too much, and that's his aim. But you know, he downplaying Europe's involvement and claiming victory on behalf of America. Now, there's no doubt about it that at the latter stages of the war, America was vastly important. We were running out of money, we were running out of weapons, we were running out of men. It was incredibly important, but it almost feels like he's stealing valor from what our men and women went through, because you know, women were dying in factories with munitions blowing up. You know, women were lost too. So will he get away with that?
Well, again, I can only tell you what my father's experience was. He'd been very seriously wounded in North Africa at Alamein with the 9th Armoured Brigade, 14th Battalion Sherman Foresters. First time that he met an American was at Anzio in March 1944. Yeah. He'd had a bellyful, literally and metaphorically, of lead from the Germans by then. He was tired. A lot of his men had been killed by that stage. These lads turned up, the Americans turned up absolutely full of enthusiasm, but fresh. They'd missed a couple or maybe 3 years of warfare by the time they saw it. Of course, their contribution was important. He admired them. He thought they were good soldiers, but they hadn't had to put up with all the horrors of Dunkirk, Alamein, etc., before they actually showed up.
When you look at recruitment at the moment with the military, it is proving to be very difficult to get people to want to join up. Is this because of the way that we don't really seem to support our veterans very well? That there doesn't seem to be, you know, that what we've seen today, for example, if that were to happen even at a smaller scale every year, to say thank you to veterans, what would it take, do you think, to get people to go, do you know what, that is a pretty decent career for me?
Petrie, you're touching a very sore point with me here. I honestly believe that if we put our heart and soul into recruiting, we could produce a full Army, Navy and Air Force, Royal Marines. Not overnight, of course not. But all it takes is a proper, thorough look at recruiting, properly funded, and a desire by the government to rebuild our armed forces from the shocking state that they're in at the moment by some simple means, which I used when I was a commanding officer. I used simple tools. I inherited a battalion that was about 80% recruited. I left the battalion, it was 120% recruited. Wow. That's a long time ago. But
So that was Colonel Patrick Nasser, former MP and military historian there, talking about the really thorny issue, actually, of recruitment, because we have been told, we have been warned, in fact, it's on the front page, I can't remember which paper now, talking, I think it was the Telegraph, talking about Russian threat and threats to us, and the threat of allowing Russia to win and to win everything with Ukraine. And the colonel there was also saying, look, you know, Putin's already ready. He's already ready to take us on. But it's okay, because what's going to happen is that our politicians will have a contingency plan for their safety. So for the people who actually caused the war, that could be on its way, that they will be okay. They will have bunkers. They will have a safe place to go. And it is interesting to me, the idea of recruitment, how we get people engaged in the idea of